Tuesday, July 21st, 2022. If we can start with roll call, please.
Chair Dennison.
Here.
Vice Chair Hutt.
Here.
Commissioners Dallas, Pevsner,
Here.
and Spears.
Present.
All right. That brings us to approval of the agenda.
I'll move we accept the agenda as posted.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Motion carries unanimously. Approval of the minutes of the July 7th, 2022 Planning Commission meeting.
Do you report out from the closed session?
Oh, I missed that. Thank you. We will now turn this over to the city attorney with a report out from closed session.
Thank you, Chair. The Planning Commission met in closed session with legal counsel to discuss anticipated litigation under Government Code Section 54956.9 D2. No reportable action was taken.
Thank you. We'll now move on to approval of minutes of the July 7th, 2022 meeting.
I have no corrections.
Good, no corrections.
I move that they are approved as posted.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously. Next, we will have the council liaison report, if there's a report to be made.
Good evening. Just a couple of things, I think a couple of which are actually relevant for the agenda tonight. So you may have seen or heard that at the last city council meeting, the council passed the temporary use permit ordinance largely as recommended by this commission, with a few notable changes, probably the most relevant being that the parcels zoned institutional would not be subject to the general temporary use permit ordinance if their general plan and or conditional use permit otherwise governed their use of the premises. So, you know, barring that, if there are institutional parcels in the town who doesn't have a general plan and or conditional use permit, then they will be governed by the general. So that I think is relevant for your agenda item tonight, and I'm sure you were aware of that. We also passed the changes to the film ordinances. You know, I know that both the Community Service Commission and the council took the feedback that this commission provided as part of their review of that, and it did pass with similar exemptions for the institutionally zoned properties. And also, I think we reduced the number of filming days that would be applicable to the applicants that would be governed by the general filming ordinance. So that was our agenda items that I think are relevant for your purposes, and again specifically for your agenda tonight. So that's all. Thank you.
Thank you very much. At this time, any person may address the Planning Commission concerning an item that is not on the agenda. The Commission welcomes your attendance and participation. When addressing the Commission, please begin by providing your name and address for the record. Please keep comments to no more than 5 minutes to assure an orderly and timely meeting. Copies of the agenda are available for your convenience on the city's website.
Good evening, Commissioners. First, I want to voice my appreciation. I really think you're doing a careful and thorough review of the Meadows project, especially given my sense that you're under pressure from the developer and the city staff to approve this, to me, audaciously flawed proposal. I sent you all written comments earlier, as well as a copy of the presentation, and since you guys have been quite busy, I thought I'd highlight several points regarding the presentation by New Urban West at the July 7th Planning Commission meeting. So although New Urban West said they were adopting the R1 definition of gross floor area and that they would present gross floor area, they again presented net floor area, which, as you all know, only includes the interior usable square footage. So slide 5 of their presentation showed that they were reducing the maximum floor area to 3,775 square feet, with the implication that it was gross floor area. But that's not the case. If you look at slide 6, it shows that the net floor area is a maximum of 3,775 square feet. which that is in line with comments Mr. Frankel had made on June 2nd, where he said they would reduce the net floor area by 500 square feet. So the specifications of two-story houses shown on June 2nd had indicated three-car garages. Therefore, a 3,775 net floor area house is actually a 4,675 gross square foot house when you include 300 square feet of exterior walls plus 600 square feet for a three-car garage. So they're planning on building a 4,675 square foot house and saying to you that it's a 3,775 square foot house because they're still not talking about gross floor area as requested by you. The next smaller house is only 125 square feet smaller, so it's approximately 4,550 square feet, and the single-story house has a two-car garage and is approximately a 3,800 gross square feet house, including the exterior walls. So while acting like they're making a major concession, the gross floor area of the largest house has actually been reduced by only about 200 square feet because they never previously factored in both the three-car garage and the exterior walls. As you heard, I think last time, the adjoining neighborhood is 90% one-story houses and 10% two-story houses. The Meadows project is 20% one-story and 80% two-story, so a flip. The adjoining neighborhood house mean net floor area is 2,008 square feet on a mean lot size of 11,044 square feet. The Meadows project is a mean net floor area of 3,500 square feet on a mean lot size of 9,500 square feet. In the adjoining neighborhood, houses are set back a minimum of 25 feet. In the Meadows project, it's 15 feet, which makes the massing oppressive from the street, especially with just 5 feet side yards. The Meadows project does not fit the character of the neighborhood. Mr. Frankel made it clear at the June 2nd meeting that he was not going to abide by R1 residential codes. In fact, he's flouting those codes. Even with reduction in house size, what is being proposed does not even remotely follow the general plan and the municipal code in Sierra Madre for R1 housing. So to me, given that New Urban West has a history of proposing large projects and then scaling them back for approval, it would seem that the Meadows should be no different in order to align with the general plan and the municipal code and the appearance of the neighborhood. So thank you again for your attention and for your efforts, and hopefully you'll have time to read what I sent. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other comments from the public about items not on the agenda? Hearing none, we will move on to our first public hearing, Conditional Use Permit 22-03, a request to allow adaptive reuse of the Villa del Sol Doro Villa for private rental events on property located at 200 North Michelin Avenue.
Thank you, Chair Dennison. We do have a PowerPoint presentation for you this evening. I did want to point out that the applicant is here, and also I just wanted to point out the consultant team that participated in the preparation of both the master plan amendment as well as the adaptive reuse of the historic villa. In terms of the presentation overview, I wanted to give a very brief background, also a quick discussion regarding the adaptive reuse of the historic landmark. Wanted to discuss the neighborhood workshops that were implemented in response to the Planning Commission's direction at your meeting back in November 2021. Including the updated noise study and a traffic study. And then I'm going to turn it over to the applicant for a presentation. And then what I wanted to do is concentrate the majority of our time looking at the conditions of approval. So in terms of background, this goes back to 2010 when the City Council approved a temporary use permit, an annual temporary use permit specifically for the El Verno Heights Academy. And back in November 18, 2021, the Planning Commission did consider a master plan update. And at that meeting, the Planning Commission stipulated that the annual TUP should be replaced with a more permanent solution, such as a conditional use permit for adaptive reuse of the villa for special events. And at the same time, during these discussions, the City Council was also considering and it also went before the Planning Commission, amendments to the TUP ordinance, and also providing recommendations to the Community Services Commission regarding the filming ordinance. And when that went to council for discussion on June 28th, the City Council directed the Planning Commission to consider filming as part of the special event CUP application, and that's what's before you today as well. On August 31st, 2022, Alverno Heights Academy, their annual TUP will expire, so it is staff's desire that the Planning Commission reach a determination prior to TUP expiration. So the adaptive reuse of the historic landmark, which is really located at the center of the campus, which was constructed in 1928 by Wallace Neff, and it was at the direction of Dr. Jarvis Barlow, the property owner, and who commissioned the construction of the villa to be a replica of a Tuscan villa that was designed by Michelangelo. The villa was then sold from Mr. Barlow to the Sisters of St. Francis, and they instituted a campus, a school, private girls' school, in 1960. So currently the villa is used for school-related functions as well as for-profit special events and filming. And since it is a historic landmark that is locally designated and also eligible on the National Register, it does receive certain benefits of designation, and one of them being adaptive reuse of historic landmarks, and that is subject to the approval of the CUP by the Planning Commission. So private rental events at the villa have occurred for over 20 years, which consist of wedding receptions and retreats. The villa is also used for commercial photography and motion picture filming, and the revenue generated from renting the villa for special events and film shoots pays for ongoing maintenance, not only for the villa but also for the campus. And the applicant wanted to go into some of the financial details with you, which was requested back in November by the Planning Commission. So back in November, the Planning Commission directed Alverno to go back, table the master plan for now, and work with the neighbors. So in January, April, and May of 2022, Alverno held 3 workshops that focused on issues and questions raised by the neighbors. Participant questions were captured in the meeting minutes, which are included in tab 1 of your master plan supplemental documents. Even though this item and a couple of the other items are more specific to the master plan, I wanted to raise them here to show that Alverno did attempt to meet with the neighbors and try to resolve many of the issues. And some of the major topics were regarding turning movement and driveway operations regarding traffic and circulation, the updated noise study and updated traffic study, which I'll go into a couple of the findings coming up next. So the updated noise study, CSDA Design Group was the consultant, and they updated the noise study on May 26, 2022. Essentially, the conclusions state that the noise levels did not exceed the noise criteria that was set forth in the 1998 Villa Noise Agreement, which is also referenced in Section 3.2 of the report. The neighborhood agreement indicated that sound emanating from the villa was reasonable if it fell within these following parameters: 70 decibels at the villa, allowing for 80 decibels for 15 minutes per hour, and 89 decibels for 5 minutes per hour, and 94 decibels for 1 minute per hour between the hours of 7 a.m. and 10 p.m. And essentially, CSDA concluded that the noise from the villa's events did not exceed the noise limits established in Chapter 9.32 of the Noise Ordinance, and also noise levels after 10 p.m. were in compliance with the Sierra Madre Noise Ordinance. The traffic study was prepared on April 30th, and the report at that time, this is 2021, so at that time the report relied upon traffic modeling and not actual traffic counts. And this was done because this was during the COVID-19 lockdown. And so they utilized a traffic model instead of conducting in-person counts. The residents noted at our November 2021 meeting that the traffic count should be conducted in person when learning resumed on the campus. W.G. Zimmerman Engineering updated the April 30th, 2021 traffic study for the master plan, and updated peak hour traffic counts were taken in November 2021 and February 2022. The counts were also conducted on weekdays, weekends excluded since weekend volumes are less than weekday volumes, and February counts were taken over a 3-day period. And those were done while enrollment was near capacity, in this case at 374 students, including after-school events. Continuing on with the traffic study findings, it was discovered that the counts were less than that predicted by the initial traffic model. The level of service for all streets serving the neighborhood remains at level of service A, and the city's general plan establishes a maximum traffic count on local streets at 2,500 vehicles per day, which accounts for approximately 200 to 300 vehicles per hour. And the traffic counts for Wilson Avenue averaged 550 per day under the daily total. And trips in the school during the peak morning hour averaged 111 under the 200 to 300 peak hour general plan policy. And the traffic counts were similar on other streets surrounding the villa. So at this point, what I want to do is actually have the applicant provide a presentation, and then we'll go back to the conditions of approval. And at that point, then I would open it up for questions. And if you have questions for the specific presentation now, I'm willing to address those too.
Good evening, Chair Dennison, Commissioners and staff. I'm Ken Farsing, the President of the Alverno Board of Trustees. Alverno appreciates your consideration of our request for the adaptive reuse of the villa, including rental events and filming. We also appreciate the support of city staff and their recommendation to approve the adaptive reuse application. And I think, as the Commission's aware, the villa is a designated city historic landmark that's worthy of preservation. Make sure I do this correctly. That's our presentation outline. I won't go through the entire outline for you, but let's kind of get into it. Now, the villa is eligible for conditional use permits under 3 separate zoning code provisions: adaptive reuse, religious uses, and assembly uses in the institutional zone. From Alverno's standpoint, we feel we have a de facto approval of the adaptive reuse of the villa by the granting of numerous permits, the uses over time, permit renewals, and that includes a temporary use permit, which was issued in 2010. The TUP was approved with 30 annual events, and it has over 50 operational conditions. And the conditional use permit does not apply to school uses. The city also has some very important general plan policies on historic preservation, and there are 4 general plan policies that guide adaptive reuse, including the grant of incentives that are mutually agreeable with the commission and the property owner. You back that up, those policies, with your historic preservation ordinance. The historic preservation ordinance codifies financial incentives for preservation, enhancement of the city's attraction to visitors, stimulating commerce, and stabilizing neighborhoods. There's also economic hardships that are looked at in the ordinance. Participation in city landmark status is voluntary, and staff noted in their report that the loss of revenue from the events will jeopardize the use of the villa for secular and non-secular events, including our Catholic religious events. The Commission can grant an application to remove the villa from landmark status if the land use restrictions preclude a reasonable rate of return. A little bit of history on the villa entitlements. The villa has been approved for private rental events for at least 30 years and filming for 54 years. There's a settlement agreement between two neighbors in Pasadena that dates back to 1998. And there's a 2006 City and Alverno joint use agreement. And facilitation with the neighbors led the City Council to approve the temporary use permit back in 2010, again with over 50 operational conditions. Very quick history of the villa. It is a very important historic resource, not only to Sierra Madre, but to the region. Dr. Barlow was an early pioneer in the treatment of lung diseases. The Barlow Sanitarium, which was established in 1902 in Elysian Park, still functions and is affiliated with LA County USC Medical Center. The Barlows engaged the noted architect Wallace Neff to design the villa, and as Vincent indicated, it's a 2/3 scale reproduction of the Villa Colazzi, which was designed by Michelangelo in the 1500s. Now, Marion Barlow was widowed in 1937. She sold the estate to the Sisters of St. Francis in 1942, who converted it to their regional headquarters. I would say that's the original adaptive reuse in 1942. The high school was founded in 1960. The villa and its spaces have been adaptively reused as a convent, a consecrated chapel, school library, classrooms, school assembly area, and fundraising, receptions, and for school plays. The villa began its use for private rental events about 30 years ago. The city first regulated the villa through special events permits, which were issued through Community Services Department, and then through the temporary use permit, which was approved by the City Council. Private events include weddings, receptions, anniversaries, birthday celebrations, memorial services, and similar events. Approximately 60% are religious in nature. Some of the events, like weddings, take months or maybe a year or more to plan, and based on past approval precedents, the villa has contracts for events that go into the next year or more. Beginning in 1968, the city approved the villa for fashion photography shoots, filming of television shows, commercials, and movies. A little bit on RLUIPA. The city attorney can go into more detail on this. The Federal Civil Rights Act was amended in 2000, which extends protections to religious institutions. The Religious Land Use and Institutional Persons Act protects religious institutions like Alverno from unreasonable limits on religious assemblies, institutions, and structures. Alverno has demonstrated that there will be a substantial burden on our exercise of religion should the adaptive reuse be denied. As city staff has noted, the loss of revenues from events and filming will jeopardize the use of the villa for religious uses, school uses, and private events. Alverno has acted in good faith to implement over 50 conditions that were imposed by the temporary use permit. City staff recommends the approval of the adaptive reuse. Now, the villa, again, has been adaptively reused in our minds since 1942. Sophos Environmental determined that the villa is historically significant and eligible for the National Register of Historic Places. At the city's direction, Alverno prepared an application for the villa's adaptive reuse in 2012. Alverno contracted with Mel Green and Associates to complete a room-by-room condition assessment report. A rehab cost estimate for the villa was prepared by Yang Tai and Associates. When the school applied for the permit, they were told that a code amendment was required. Alverno was never informed that the code amendment had been completed, and for the past 10 years, Alverno has requested that the TUP be renewed, and our requests have been granted. On the budgetary cost estimate, the villa's rehab cost estimate has been adjusted for work completed, new work, and adjusted for inflation, when construction inflation has run at least 32% since the completion of the original cost estimate, and that doesn't include inflation in 2022. The current villa cost estimates of renovation is over $1.6 million. A number of items were not in the cost estimate. For example, roof replacement was not included. The school received bids in 2020 from a number of roofers, and we were looking at estimates of $240,000 to replace the roof. Mel Green's study did not review restoration of our historic grounds. For example, due to leaks, water leaks, we've had to reline the mirror pool that's in front of the villa. I think, as you know, the villa is going to be close to 100 years old. It's in 1924 will be 100, and it requires significant repairs. Alverno has provided a host of community benefits over the decades and will continue to do so. Complimentary events are provided to the city, the Wisteria Festival, Sierra Madre Elementary and Secondary Schools, private schools in the community, and the Friends of the Library. Since there's a lack of recreational space in Sierra Madre, we have provided the softball field to the Sierra Madre Girls Softball Association for the past 30 years. Over $4.1 million in improvements have been made to the campus in the last 10 years, including view fencing, public walkways, perimeter landscaping, the athletic field itself, and in our prayer garden. I won't go into detail on the temporary use permit because we'll be discussing it a bit later, and it is the last tab in your information binder. We believe it was very well thought out and includes a comprehensive set of conditions. Now, the school meets semi-annually with the neighbors within 300 feet of the campus to discuss and respond to villa issues and school issues. With the exception of COVID restrictions, we've been holding these meetings during the past 12 years. Now we'll turn to the noise study. The Board of Trustees felt it was important to study the noise generated from typical rental events. This had never been done before. Even when the TUP was issued, we did not have a noise study of rental events. Now, one event was a wedding with an outdoor service, a dinner in the villa, and dancing on the terrace. The other event was a Quinceanera with an outdoor mass, dining and dancing on the terrace. Now, I'd like to introduce Mr. Indy Savatala, who is CSDA's Director of Acoustics, and he completed the noise studies. There you go. Right click.
Oh, fair enough. Thank you very much. Hi, my name is Indy. I'm the Director of Acoustics for CSDA. For the noise study, we placed 5 monitors, one along Wilson Street, second on West Grandview, third on Michelin Avenue, fourth on West Highland, and the fifth on the second floor exterior column of the villa overlooking the outdoor terrace. All noise monitors were time synced and started days before events started over the weekend, so that way they were just part of the permanent landscape before any of the events started. Here's a summary of the noise criteria that was stated earlier. 6 dB above the local ambient is what we were very much looking at. If it did go over the ambient, then it allows for 84 dBA for 15 minutes within an hour, 89 dBA for 5 minutes within an hour, and 94 dBA for 1 minute within an hour. And after 10 p.m., so from 10 p.m. to 7 a.m., the noise ordinance states that the noise should not exceed 6 dBA above the local ambient. Here was the noise from the second floor of the villa overlooking the wedding event from April 23rd. What's really important is that dark dashed black line at the top, which shows that the noise from the event never exceeded 70 dBA within the campus. So that's right at the villa. Subsequently, here are all the data from the other 4 noise monitors. Understanding that it's small and kind of hard to read, the top dashed line indicates the criteria, in this case for the 15-minute average. And the little dotted line that goes underneath that is the criteria of ambient plus 6 dBA. The point being that for a 15-minute average during this event, the noise criteria was not exceeded. Looking at it at a 5-minute average, there were some peaks, and we did verify that any of those peaks were not from the event from the villa. And looking at it even more strictly from a 1-minute average, we still did not see any peaks that exceeded the noise criteria. Here is the April 30th Quinceanera event. There was one peak that did exceed 70 dBA within the campus. The noise criteria does a lot for that. And what we were able to show was that there were no exceedances outside of the campus at the residences. This is the 15-minute average. Getting more strict, here's a 5-minute average. And looking at it from an even stricter perspective, here's a 1-minute average. Overall, our conclusion is that noise from the villa for the two events that were measured did not exceed the ambient or the 1998 agreement. Our conclusion is that traffic noise mainly dominates the noise environment around the neighborhood. And again, for the April 23rd and April 30th private events at the villa were in compliance with the noise code and the 1998 agreement. Thank you.
At the Planning Commission meeting in November, there were questions about the noise monitoring. We wanted to share with you what we've been doing since the approval of the TUP. We implemented a sound monitoring program. Now, the program involves our private security guard taking and logging noise measurements at various locations during the special events. Now, the school supplies the guard with a certified, lab-tested, handheld noise monitoring equipment and also with log sheets. The guard works with Alverno staff on site to ensure that noise levels are below the required level. Now, we requested that the police department provide the calls for service for villa private events during the last 5 years. They've been able to provide us with the past 39 months, which we've summarized. There were 9 calls in this time period for service, and a majority were noise related. Now, a call for service does not mean that there's a code violation. Violations must be determined by the investigating officer. There has been 1 call for service this year. There were no calls for service in 2019 and 2020. That's probably due to the pandemic and less use of the villa. There were 8 calls in 2021, and 4 were related to a September 8th wedding. Officers generally reported that noise levels were reasonable and not loud at the September 8th event. The police reported that the event monitor would have the volume lowered even though there was no violation of the noise ordinance. Now, we put together a proposal for modifications to the TUP, and we can go through this in more detail. As I understand, Vincent wanted to go through the TUP conditions, but you can see there, one of the requests we have more controversial is that we go to 40 private events instead of 30. And then we have some recommendations for the 2 events per month to be held during July, August, and December. Some recommendations on our cumulative event calendar, Sunday events, and then there's some additional proposals there that we can walk through with you. Now, let's briefly talk about filming, which has been added to this permit by the City Council. We've prepared a survey of 7 years of filming, which the Commission saw this at your workshop on filming. Now, productions range in size from small fashion photography shoots to medium-sized commercials and large-sized feature films. Filming includes set preparation, the actual filming itself, and the breakdown of the set. Most filming the most filming that we recorded during this time period was for 66 days, and you can see that in 2019. Now, not all film shoots and their impacts are the same. Much pre-production work takes place inside the villa with limited impacts. Now, revenues from filming can have a wide variance from year to year, depending on the amount and the type of production. Production was impacted by COVID restrictions and was also impacted severely by the writer's strike. You can see the unpredictable nature of filming revenues when we show you the villa's revenue and expense chart. It's coming up in a second here. We also asked the police department provide calls for service on filming within the last, again, this was 39 months. We asked for 5 years. There were a total of 6 calls. There were no calls for this year. 1 call in 2021, 1 call in 2020, 3 calls in 2019. The officers listed 5 of the calls in their report as either unfounded or there were no violation. There was 1 violation where a crew member had a noisy muffler and the officers asked him to leave the shoot. We've put together, in terms of our proposal, compared to the staff proposal, and we have to basically give a caveat to that, is that we have not seen the final film ordinance. It's not yet available for public review. I think it still needs to go to second reading for the City Council. That's my understanding. So we may have some questions on the application of the film ordinance and how it relates to the conditional use permit and filming that the commission would consider. So on condition 1, the staff proposed filming to be limited to 45 days. We've basically countered with a proposal that we have 60 days. The staff proposed film production must be 10 days apart, and we feel that's a problem. Oftentimes productions come right behind each other because of the seasonality of filming, and we'd like to see a week apart. The other question we have is more toward the city's film permit, and that's basically the lighting. We'd like to see set lighting to be shielded or directed in such a manner as to not directly impact surrounding properties. We think that's reasonable. And then basically there's a situation where if you need a variance from any of these standards, the city council has approved a variance process, and it's basically our understanding there would be a petition that would be circulated to occupants within 250 feet of, in this case, Alverno, and a 75% majority of the occupants would have to sign on that. Now, Alverno's a really large property at 12.1 acres. We've looked at 250-foot radius, and there's over 90 properties. I think it's 93 properties that are just in Sierra Madre, not including Pasadena. And it's our understanding that you just survey Sierra Madre and you don't survey Pasadena with the petition. And we just think the 75% approval requirement is basically unreasonable, and we would like to see a 2/3 supermajority. I think that's pretty common, looking at supermajorities. Now, we've provided you, really under protest, a 6-year review of the villa's revenues and expenses. I believe one of the commissioners had asked for that in November. Now, the event revenues do not cover the costs of the villa's operations and maintenance. So when you look at the chart, I want you to focus in on that. Filming revenues assist in funding major capital projects to the villa. Also, we've had projects up on the campus that we've used the money for too. Now, the existing TUP approved 30 events annually, Friday through Sunday. We're requesting 40 to assist in covering the growing costs of the villa. And the reason we're asking for that is that there's major financial uncertainty from the city's filming permit restrictions. We're going into a brave new world on filming, and we don't really understand how it's going to impact our bottom line as a school. So I'm going to introduce Julie Dyer Lopez now. Julie basically is going to review, or at least talk kind of generically about this. I know it's difficult to see. Hopefully the commissioners can see it. You're a little bit closer to it. And I think we also ran copies of it. Good, you have copies of it too. Good. So Julie is our director. She's a local resident here in Sierra Madre, and she's had 3 girls that have 2 graduated from Alverno. 1 is a senior this year. And she's been on our board for a number of years and is the director of our finance committee. So I'm going to have Julie come up, talk a little bit about some of the constraints we have. And then we'll conclude.
Sorry, and I don't have my glasses, so thank you for having us here again tonight. As Ken alluded to earlier in our presentation, the cost to maintain the villa, the rentals from filming and weddings do not cover the cost, to maintain the villa, and we have a laundry list of, repairs that we need to do on the property. I've listed out a few of those. We did an estimate back in 2012, I think it was, Ken?
Mm-hmm.
And it was about $1.2 million, and that didn't include everything that needed to be done. It's closer to about $3 million now, I think, including the new items that were added to the list. And we have to make reserves for that. So this schedule here that you're seeing will show the revenues we've brought in the last 5 years, not including the COVID year, which we took in $3,000. And then we have our expenses, and it shows a little bit of income before our reserves for these repairs. We've made some repairs, not, and I think there was I think you broke that down here.
Yeah, there were major
Yeah.
repairs in 2019.
Right,
2020.
2019, when we did the softball field, we, upgraded the electrical work and what have you. I think that any cut on filming is going to be detrimental to the school because it's not, consistent. We don't know when, rentals are gonna happen. Same thing with, photo shoots and what have you. And we need that money to cover villa expenses. And, yeah, I don't know what else to,
Thank you, Julie.
yeah.
In conclusion, we believe Alverno's request to continue the adaptive reuse of the villa is reasonable, and again, it's supported by city staff. The approval will further Alverno's religious mission by preserving a valuable worship space. And approval will implement the city's historic preservation goals and policies and complies with the city's historic preservation ordinance. The city's approved filming at Alverno for at least the last 54 years. Filming has provided substantial funding for the operations, maintenance, preservation of the villa, its historic grounds, and benefits the community. The school cannot afford to maintain and restore the villa without financial assistance from the events and the filming. And noise studies have demonstrated that rental events are far under the noise levels established by the city and by the 1998 settlement agreement. And from our standpoint, relatively few neighborhood complaints have been received, and a majority of complaints were unsubstantiated. Alverno has made a good faith effort to implement over 50 operational conditions on the villa to address city and neighborhood concerns. Thank you for your time.
So at this time, I wanted to go through the temporary use permit conditions that were established back in 2021. What I've created is a red line, underlined strike-through document. What the original temporary use permit did not include was general conditions. So these are some of our typical general conditions that you see here that we include for variances, conditional use permits, and design review applications. Some more specific to this particular request, including a revocation of conditional use permits is included in here. It's really addressing what the code is stating. And it's also saying that the execute and deliver to the city's Department of Planning Community Preservation affidavit, which is another typical requirement. Also we added the conditions regarding filming or photography activity and temporary uses applied to the property as a whole, inclusive of both the school and the villa. So those are the general conditions. In terms of, I also reorganized, this is actually the original one, so noise, no live band shall be allowed. Instruments, stringed instruments only may be used for weddings without amplification devices. So all of these remain as per the original 2021 TUP, and in the underlined strikeout in red are the deviations or edits to those original conditions. So 1.4, addressed central air conditioning shall be installed the villa pursuant to a mutually agreeable timetable between Alverno and the city is what staff has chosen to include as a condition, striking neighbors. Alverno and the neighbors shall commence negotiation of the timetable within the life of the TUP.
Why are we concerned about AC?
This was the original TUP. I was actually going to strike the entirety of that, was my preference.
Is the goal to get some of the outside stuff inside so
Inside.
it's not noisy?
So, in
Right.
other words, so when it's being used by other people, they bring in temporary air conditioning units, which make a lot of noise, and they add to the, okay, intensity of use.
Yes.
Okay, got it. All right.
So do you have any modifications to this condition?
Well, are we gonna?
I
mean,
think we have to take,
We haven't had public comment,
yeah, so we have to have presentation first before we deliberate on
That's
it,
true.
right?
That's true. In Alverno's presentation this evening, it was indicated that a couple of events did include dancing on the terrace. The TUP said that dancing would not be allowed, so Alverno is requesting to include dancing on the terrace as part of the conditional use permit requirement.
I guess one thing I'd like to know, if we're gonna open the public hearing up after this and hear from the applicant and residents, is if we're gonna have dancing on the terrace, but there's no amplified music except inside, how are people dancing on the terrace with no music? Because that doesn't seem to follow to me.
So we can get clarification on that. I'm assuming that there'll be some music performance on the terrace. No? So you're just gonna have music playing on the interior of the, hear it from the inside. 1.6, that the Alverno will have to comply with the city's noise ordinance. 1.7, regarding sound dampening measures. The one change, Alverno and the neighbors shall commence negotiate at the timetable within the life of the TUP. That was removed because it's no longer referencing a TUP requirement. This is a conditional use permit requirement.
So maybe we can hear from Alverno on 1.4 and 1.7, the progress, if those things were done or where we're at.
Would you like them to respond now?
No, I think if we go through, we can
Okay.
generate a list, unless y'all
1.4
want
and
to hear now. It
1.7.
seems more efficient to go through the whole thing and then they can
Yeah.
respond.
Yeah, I'd like to hear about 3.1 and 3.2.
Yeah.
And I have some questions for staff about the sound levels that are referenced in the study.
Okay.
So I don't know how best to do this. Do you want to present fully on comparing and contrasting this, and then we can ask clarifying questions, and then we can have public comment?
Let's go ahead and do that, and then we'll quickly identify what we want to come back to.
So 1.6 would be something I want to come back to.
1.7, we talked about that. Now we're at frequency of use, level of use. A total of no more than 30 rental events per calendar year may be held. That was original to the TUP, and staff is proposing 26 rental events per calendar year. 2.2, no more than 2 rental events per month may be held during the months of, originally it was May through October. Alverno is suggesting July through August and the month of December, so we can get clarification on 2.2 as well. That was alluded to Mr. Farfstein's presentation. The remaining conditions are the same. 2.5, the cumulative calendar shall include contact numbers for all on-site event monitors as well as the off-site Alverno staff member. And this really specifically pertains to special events.
Will this, this is a time when the events that are being held on the campus are, so the neighbors are aware?
Yes.
And if we limit it to only the filming events, then they may not understand why there is a dance or a prom or something else. Can this calendar include both the filming events and the curricular events and the student life events, so that, because they all generate noise in the area, and so that people will be aware?
I think that's something we should ask the representatives from Alverno if they can include that. But is it possible? Yes.
Okay.
Time of use, rental events shall only be held on Fridays, Saturdays, or Sundays. Staff was proposing to eliminate the Sunday events, and Alverno is requesting to retain the Sunday events but prohibit weddings on Sundays, so we can discuss that as well.
Yeah, I think it'd be helpful for Alverno and also the neighbors to discuss the type of events and the impacts. Because being an uninitiated, it seems like a photo shoot might have less impacts, but I'd really like to know what people think.
And 3.2, Friday or Saturday night rental events shall begin no earlier than 9 a.m. and then no later than 10 p.m. with all music ending no later than 9:30 p.m. Alverno is suggesting Sunday rental events shall begin no earlier than 12 p.m. and then no later than 8 p.m. with all music ending by 7:30. So they're proposing, again, Sunday events. Alcohol, 4.1, is just a cleanup item, CUP, referencing CUP instead of the TUP. And alcohol will not be served the last hour of the event. Alverno is requesting the last 30 minutes of the event to be able to serve alcohol. Traffic and parking section. This we've already addressed. We talked briefly about it, 5.2, regarding traffic monitoring for the events, and also providing monitors to address any traffic and parking problems that arise. And these should be discussed with the neighbors at quarterly meetings. This really should say semi-annual meetings. And this was also pointed out by Alverno. So quarterly meetings would go to semi-annual meetings. And regarding section 8, condition 8, litter and garbage, there was a condition that said clean up immediately after events. There was a restriction in terms of disposing outdoor trash, including bottles, which would make a lot of noise apparently, and suggested revised language would be that all bottles shall be bagged and not deposited in outdoor trash bins after 9 p.m. the day of the event. On-site event monitor. This is an inclusion, a new condition of approval. Staff included this condition that Alverno shall pay for an on-site event monitor, which can be a third party or city staff.
And that's for all?
Yes.
And that's at the city manager's determination?
Yes. And again, just replacing TUP with CUP for 10.2. And then this is the new section, which is addressing film or photography activity, which is parallel with the film ordinance. These are more specific to Alverno, and the film ordinance, anything that's not listed here, falls back to the film ordinance. That is going for second reading on Tuesday before City Council. And it's essentially saying that the, all film and photography activity must be consistent with the section chapter 5.36 film or photography activity, which is the new ordinance that was being amended. Filming shall be limited to 45 days per year. Film productions must be at least 10 days apart. Alverno is requesting 7 days apart. And event staging areas, including off-site locations, to be included in application, and there must be a total of 14 days between productions. And I was going to clarify with the city attorney, is that correct? Or is it 10 days? Number 13.3.
Yeah, 13.3 was a leftover provision. That should be struck.
Let me make a note of that. If I can turn the page. Okay. Event staging areas, including off-site locations, to be included in application. That was a comment that was raised by the community, that these off-site location staging areas should be included in the application and counted towards the 14 days between productions. And in this case, it's probably for Alverno will be 10 days. So 13.3 would be, that would be the 10 days. Generators to be on Alverno grounds with a minimum of 150 feet from any residential property. Again, there was concerns from the community that generators were included in off-site locations or on the perimeter of the property in an effort to try to minimize sound projections was to require that all generators be 150 feet from any residential property. Again, no idling equipment shall be permitted. Cost of third-party film monitor to be included in film permit. And all on-site events, monitor staff shall read these conditions and sign a statement indicating that they're aware and will enforce these conditions.
One note, when staff was talking to Alverno about the generator issue, that conversation was happening exclusively in the filming context, but it might also be the case that for temporary uses, generators are being used. I don't know, but the Planning Commission can certainly impose this same generator condition for temporary uses as well, these special events. As well as the idling of equipment.
And generators, I mean, we're not defining that, but it's pretty understood to mean like internal combustion engines, right? If they had a big battery to operate this stuff, we wouldn't care because it wouldn't be noisy.
Correct, and that was staff's interpretation as well.
Okay.
And they make generators that are actually called whisper generators that are very quiet. We can't write that into the ordinance.
I would stay away from that level of specificity.
Okay.
So this concludes the conditions. What you see here as strike-through text is actually, I move that to general conditions.
I'm sorry, I just wanted to make sure as you're discussing these that you have the Alverno requests. They're not all listed on what Vincent passed out there. So, basically I just wanted to make sure on filming, we had asked for 60 days. That's 13.1. And then we also had raised the issue of the variance to try to get variances from these different standards. And again, we don't really understand how the city's film ordinance is going to apply to Alverno at this point in time. And then, so that would be basically a new condition. We had it listed 13.9. And our proposal is to have petitions circulated to occupants within 250 feet with a 2/3 supermajority, 66.7% approval. And then on lighting, we had a condition 13.8. Set lighting shall be shielded or directed in such a manner as to not directly impact surrounding properties.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
What's your student population right now?
We're at the 370.
375?
Yeah, about that, about 375.
Okay, less than 4 kids, okay.
I want to make sure that we've got these. I don't want you wasting your time.
Isn't there a general notice provision?
There is no general notice provision in these conditions. The general notice provision exists in the underlying ordinance. And to clarify, all of the underlying requirements in the filming ordinance and the TUP ordinance will apply. And the only standards that vary from the ordinance are the standards, are the conditions that will be imposed under this conditional use permit. So there currently is a 300-foot radius noticing requirement for filming.
And so the exception within 250 feet at 75% is in the underlying filming ordinance.
Correct. So right. And to draw that distinction, when there is filming happening, residents within a 300-foot radius will be notified.
No
But
matter
if-
where it is in town?
Correct. Of Alverno, correct.
Oh, no,
matter-
not at just Alverno, but anywhere in Sierra Madre?
In the underlying code.
In the
underlying code.
Okay.
Correct. I'm sorry. Yes.
Yeah, so no, if it's downtown Sierra Madre, it's gonna be 300 feet.
Right. Correct.
Okay. And they wanna scale it back to less than that.
No.
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 The notice,
That's-
we would do the notice at 300 feet.
That's different. The notice is different than what Mr. Farsing is talking about. So what Mr. Farsing is talking about is after the notice, if they want to have more events beyond what the standard requires, or they want to have it later in the day, or they want to have it less than 10 days apart, then they can do that, but they would have to get 75% of the neighboring residents to sign off on that variance from the code. And the measurement is it's 75% of residents within 250 feet of the subject property, and that was reduced from 300 to 250 to concentrate to allow the residents most affected to have a greater say in the determination of whether or not to vary from that underlying code.
And that is only applies to filming permits.
That
Yes.
no, that currently is drafted to apply to, because the underlying ordinance has that for filming only currently. Yes, that's right.
So if they want to do a wedding on Sunday or have a wedding that went till midnight, they just can't do that.
Currently, no. I will say that staff is considering introducing a variance procedure like something like that for the TUP ordinance for the second reading for council. But currently, as drafted, the TUP ordinance does not have that exception.
And then, with regard to the condition of approval that Alberto mentioned on lighting, what's the rule in the underlying?
The underlying rule, I believe, is that it has to be lighting must be directed downward. I believe is the language. I can look up the exact language, but I believe it's directed downward.
So it's sort of a dark sky thing?
I don't know.
Okay.
Don't know if that's the.
Just a practical application of the variance is, let's say you adopt 45 days for Alverno. If a production ran over and they needed an additional 5 days to finish their film, they could apply for the variance and then circulate that petition to the neighbors. I think that's the correct
Right.
application, isn't
Right.
that correct? Okay.
And you're talking, you want to reduce that by 8 people. That's the math, right? You want to go from 75?
Yeah, we don't understand where the 75% came from. That's a really high bar. I mean, when you think of California law and, super majorities, it's 66.7%. I mean, that's a high bar too. When you're doing a tax initiative, good luck getting 2/3 majority.
The-
So,
the reasoning behind the 75% commissioners is, during the earlier phase of drafting the ordinance, there was some contention regarding whether or not we should remove the signature requirement that applies for filming, and that signature requirement applies to all filming activities.
Right.
And so the compromise was that you remove the signature requirement for all filming activities, and you create standards to address the heart of the issue, what's actually bothering residents there. And part of that deal is in exchange for removing the signature requirement, that and making sure that residents are able to enjoy their homes within those standards set. If we're going to deviate from those standards, then you have to go get signatures from residents, and it was intentionally a high bar in order to make sure that those standards set by council are the standards that are adhered to throughout the city. And that was the reasoning.
And again, in Alverno's case, we're a 12-acre property, really large, so it's a big list. The other one I wanted to point out is on sound dampening measures. This still has the language from the TUP, which is measures will be implemented pursuant to a mutually agreeable timetable between Alverno and the neighbors. We always had concerns with the two conditions, the one on air conditioning and the one on sound dampening measures, because we didn't know who the neighbors were. Who are we supposed to go talk to? I mean, we originally had a neighbor group that was put together for facilitation, and one of the neighbors took the lead in contacting all the other neighbors. To us, it just seems, and then they disappeared, they moved away or whatever, so now there's no one responsible for the neighbors. It just seemed to us an improper delegation of, the authority that the city has. So that's why, we liked what Vincent had put in there, that's basically there's a timetable between Alverno and the city. I mean, again, who are the neighbors? It's 194 occupants out there that we're negotiating with for a timetable? I mean, it's just, to me, it's impractical.
More about the air conditioning and what the importance of that was, and also what your progress on the air conditioning has been?
The air conditioning was, again, as part of the facilitation through the MIG effort, the neighbors had recommended air conditioning, and I think one of the commissioners had talked about concentrating all the uses inside the villa. During the summer, close the windows, get some air conditioning going. So basically, we had not done any noise studies in 2011, and we didn't really have a good handle on if we were to close the windows and put air conditioning in, would it actually result in any noise reductions? So basically what we found is basically over the years, when the music starts inside the villa, basically the windows and shutters are closed. We close as many doors as the fire code allows us to close. We still need to leave 2 open. But like the main door on Michelin is closed. And we decided at that point in time, again, who are we going to negotiate with this timetable? The neighbors had disappeared, so we didn't do the air conditioning. So the air conditioning was not installed. And it was central air, which to us made no sense whatsoever. It's 15,000 square foot building, and some of it isn't even occupied. So why would we be putting air conditioning in like an upstairs area that used to be part of the convent? So for us, it made more sense just to concentrate on the areas where perhaps the event was occurring, some of the rooms downstairs. So there were some problematic issues with this condition on central air.
Commissioners, when staff was reviewing these conditions, staff was also of the opinion that because a lot of these issues haven't been able to get addressed between the members of the community and Alverno, that it'd probably be best if those provisions were removed and that the commission itself made some determination or set some timetable as appropriate.
And then we had, as the one condition, we had asked for the 40 events versus the 26.
Question for staff. The applicant is confused on who the neighbors are. Is it possible to provide the applicant with the same list that we give other applicants about who gets notified? I mean, isn't that public records?
I think possibly, if it can be discovered. This was from the 2021 CUP. As indicated, I wouldn't quite know unless we were able to find out what committee was appointed by the neighborhood.
But for other applications, we ask that the applicant notified neighbors, and they pay a fee, and a card shows up at the neighbor's house. I mean, that seems like a reasonable way. That's not that those aren't secret records so that the applicant then can freely find out who in fact the neighbors are and can send appropriate correspondence.
Well, we basically use a service, and they provide us with a radius map. I can give it to you, and they also provide us with, from the county tax records, who the property owners are. That mailing list is provided to the city. I think we've included it in your binder, so you actually have the map. So that wasn't our point. Our point is that I'm not saying that we don't know who the neighbors are, because we have a list, but when the condition was put in to go negotiate with the neighbors, it's 194 people, and they had been represented by one group, and it basically, we couldn't get a hold of the group anymore. So that's our concern. Thank you.
Wait, can I ask a question on the issue with the maximum number of events, both filming and the wedding events, and then also having the wedding on Sunday or the not weddings? Like, what events do you have that aren't weddings, and why do you have music at those events? So I'm trying to understand, like,
Right.
if we were to say, okay, Sunday, but not weddings, what are we saying okay to?
Well, what you're looking at is perhaps a birthday party. You might be looking at a wedding anniversary. You could be looking at a memorial service. We do quite a few memorial services on Sundays. Person passes away. So there is music at some of those events. It could be recorded music. It could be at perhaps you have someone playing a harp or something at a memorial service. So I guess, Julia, did you want to? All right. Andrea basically does our monitoring of our events. So
the majority of Sunday requests are baptisms, because baptisms happen on Sunday in churches, and then we do have baptisms on our site because we have a blessed sacristan. Also memorials. Those are the biggest two. The others that we've ever been asked for, really, I've only seen one wedding on a Sunday in my time of being a part of facilities. But it's a shorter time. They have to end earlier and start later. So most weddings don't even want to look at a Sunday. But for those baptisms, or also memorials, or a baby shower, anniversary party, the majority of them have like a Bluetooth speaker. And like Ken said, during the mass or those things, there might be instruments, but we still follow all the guidelines of the TUP.
okay.
Public comment? Right.
Oh, I had some clarifying questions yet for staff. Commissioner Pevner, did you have any questions?
Go ahead.
There were references made to the sound levels, and I guess when I read the city code, it had a different set of values in it than were listed in the sound study, and so I'm curious as to what the standing is, for lack of a better word, of the sound standards that were used.
So I believe that was established through a settlement agreement. There was a lawsuit. Mr. Farsing could probably elaborate further than I, but those were from that agreement with the neighborhood, those specific decibel readings.
But the city's not party to that agreement.
The city, I don't think, is party to that agreement, and I haven't compared the two. So, Commissioner, are you, or Chair Dennison, I'm sorry, are you saying that what was the standards set in the sound study are higher than what's permitted under the code?
When I looked at the sound report that was prepared, it listed what the city code was for noise, and that number was something significantly smaller than the number that was compared to in the study. And so maybe if the sound expert is still here, he can explain.
Hi, could you clarify what the values are that you were looking at, and then we can think, get to the bottom of this.
Yeah, so in section 3.0, you list what the 3.1 refers to the Sierra Madre Code as to what noise is allowed.
And I'm sorry, I don't have that in front. I apologize. I don't
Oh,
have
no, no problem. So I'll read you a snippet. It's page 4 of 39 of your report.
Thank you.
So, according to code, the minimum level of ambient noise can be determined at 40 decibels. And it says that for residential property, noise limits no more than 6 decibels above local ambient noise,
Right.
which is significantly lower than the numbers that are from the study. And so I guess I was curious as to how we arrived at the numbers that we used as the baselines for this study, because it doesn't seem like it's based in our code, and so I didn't understand where the numbers came from.
So the study is definitely based in your code. We did compare to 6 dB over the ambient. In doing so, what we did was we placed noise monitors 24 hours a day for multiple days to track how the sound kind of fluctuates throughout the time when the villa was operational and not operational. And we took those levels, which vary hour by hour, and we added 6 dB to that. That's how these noise codes are written, so that it's 6 dB over the sort of hourly ambient. And the graphs that I showed indicate that the noise levels from the villa did not exceed that 6 dB plus ambient code.
So, I guess, help me understand if the ambient noise is varying at all times,
Mm-hmm.
how it is that we have a flat line at which we're comparing to when we're over it.
The flat line that you speak of, just so I don't know if we can
You
bring
can
that.
start on page 9 of 39.
The flat line that's across the top, that line, that 70 dBA criteria, that's from the 1998 agreement. And that's noise directly at the villa, within the property of the villa.
But
Right.
But that's not our code. That's
That
just,
is correct. That is
just
not
a
your code.
random number that was agreed to between.
I don't know about random, but it's a number that was agreed to as part of that agreement. It has nothing to do with code.
Okay.
The city would not even comment on it.
Right.
Right. Okay. Because that's not affecting the residences. That's only affecting.
Where did that line come from?
Yeah. Well, I'm just trying to understand if
Absolutely.
we've picked a number, and we're saying that that's the line that we didn't exceed. I'm trying to understand the basis for that line, if not our code.
Yeah, why is it that number?
I wasn't a part of that agreement.
Yeah.
Ken.
Yeah, that agreement goes back to 1998. It's even older than I am. That's a joke. I was actually a parent at the school in 1998, not on the board. And my understanding was it was in Pasadena. 2 residents, Janet Owens and Chuy Chow, who live on Michelin, sued the school over noise. And I think because they were Pasadena residents, they really couldn't use the Sierra Madre code. I think that's the only thing that I could figure out. So they must have hired a sound acoustical expert to come up with some type of objective measures to see if that Alverno is violating any objective measures for the neighbors. So that was agreed to in the settlement agreement. What the Board of Trustees wanted to do this time around is, because neighbors have said we're violating the settlement agreement, we wanted to study both the city code, which is more restrictive, and also the settlement agreement. So it's really there for, basically purposes, educational purposes for everyone, because noise is very difficult to understand. So again, we just wanted to provide that information.
So
Does that answer your question?
Yeah, that answers my question.
Okay.
Thank you. So then, from a code perspective, the city doesn't have an allowance for non-residential noise production?
I'll have to defer to the planning director.
I do not believe it does.
So we have seen a picture of a gentleman with a sound meter, and he's dutifully recording the sound. He's measuring the sound and writing it down. But what is that relating to in terms of the city of Sierra Madre? It just, he's got numbers on, but is there a line that how does he know when it's too loud?
I've never had to measure noise at the city, so I don't know exactly that calculation, but I will say that the ordinance does require, the conditions in the CUP do require that the applicant comply with the city standards. So I'm not sure how the city standards are applied in the city, but however they're applied, the applicant must.
Because we've heard from the neighbors that there's a sound problem, and that seems to be the most consistent problem, but we haven't really defined where the line is.
We haven't defined where the city line is.
Where
Right.
where our city line.
Where
is.
the city defines the line, yeah.
Right.
Well,
And
if the city's measurement is ambient plus 6 decibels, that we see that on a couple of these events, it goes over that level for very short periods of time, but it does go over it. And so, one of the questions is, you know, the numbers that were in the settlement agreement have sort of a base level and then an allowance to go over, you know, be loud for a little bit of time. You know, I guess the question is, does the city code have some of that kind of thing? Because if not, I would assume they're technically violating the city code because they've gone more than 6 decibels over ambient.
Yeah, and we can speak to code enforcement to figure out how code enforcement enforces this provision of the municipal code. I currently am unable to answer that question.
I mean, we're going to require a monitor, and the monitor is, one of their jobs is sound, and so we should probably have some clear definition of when it's a problem.
Yeah.
Because I know we have residents that are measuring the sound, and
Decibels over ambient.
and it's
how do
like,
you-
but I don't know what that means.
And then I guess with regards to that report, how do you validate that a noise wasn't caused by the event?
There were 2 ways that we validated that noise was not caused by the villa. The first way is by having the monitor at the villa and all the monitors synced in time. We were able to look at it at granular level. We took second by second measurements, which I do not want to bore you with that amount of data. So we could actually say, okay, you'll see there was an exceedance for the Quinceanera at 8 o'clock. We know that that's from the villa. We're not trying to hide that. That's in the graphs because you can see that it actually goes over the 70 dBA, but that's within Sierra Madre, within the campus area. So we then took that slice of time, said, okay, let's look at exactly the same amount of time around the other 4 monitors and see how far the noise came up at those monitors.
So it wasn't a backfire from a car going up Michelin or something.
So those events did happen. You'll see that there's areas in which we highlighted that said noise not caused from the villa. That's traffic noise, maybe someone's dog barking. When we looked at that slice of time and then compared it to say what was happening at the villa, the noise level at the villa was flatline, quiet, no peaks. So there was no way to correlate those 2 events, which means that it didn't come from the villa, it just came from somewhere else.
And I don't know if you've been at other ones, but did you compare these events versus other events where they had the monitors recording to validate that these are characteristic events?
My understanding is these are characteristic events. I do believe that every event, they have noise monitors going. So I think they can make that information available if you like. But yeah, there were people on campus also recording those events and recording those noise levels. I can speak a bit too about code enforcement, because as a big noise dork, that is another part of what I do, that I've done for other cities. In terms of how other cities enforce code, when a violation does occur and an enforcement officer is called, the enforcement officer will stand next to their vehicle with a noise monitor similar to the noise monitors that Alverno Heights purchased, and will stand there from anywhere from 5 to 15 minutes, time undetermined, look at the noise monitor, record the noise level, and make a determination in that time frame to say, yes, this is above or below code. So that the intent of the 6 dBA over ambient is really to catch constant noise like a generator or some sort of HVAC equipment that turns on, that runs for hours at a time, that is very obnoxious. When you have events, you will always have peaks and troughs in those events. You'll have a time when the DJ accidentally turns it up, mic check, oh, sorry, and turns it back down. Someone slams a car door, or 10 people slam their car doors on their way out. Those aren't technically exceedances that the city would need to deal with. There's no way to enforce any of that either. That's why the 1998 agreement is actually pretty brilliant in the fact that it gets granular down to 1 minute to say, look, if you exceed, don't go over this limit for every, for even 1 minute of time. The city doesn't go that granular. So we wanted to show both the city code and the 1998 agreement just to show compliance with both.
Okay, and so each of these charts that you've provided to us, they do have the charted number of 6 dBA over ambient.
Absolutely.
Which is our code, and so that's really the line that pertains to us.
That's
And-
correct.
And what we see is that at only 1 minute or one small epoch,
That's correct. What's
is the
unclear,
only incidents where it went over. in
what's
those two token
unclear
events.
about the 6 dBA over the ambient is the time duration in which you're looking at. Are you looking at an hour, 15 minutes, 10 minutes, 1 second, right? And that's, if you look at it from a really granular level, 1 minute or even 5 minutes, you're always going to go above code at some point within 1 or 5 minutes. If you're looking at it a little more macro level, 15, 30, or 1 hour, that's more in line with the intent of a 6 dBA over ambient code. And some cities have enforced more granularity to say 6 dBA over ambient for every 1 hour, for every 30 minutes, it's this level, and they get a little more granular.
And maybe this is what you were just speaking to, but to measure ambient, I mean, you guys took readings for multiple days to determine what this fluctuation is in the ambient noise. And so it doesn't, how practical is it to even have somebody just show up in a car and take a 5-minute reading and say what the ambient noise level is?
It's subjective. It's challenging to answer your question. I'm trying not to back myself into a corner. It's understandable to do that when you have a constant noise source. It's much more challenging when you have an event.
So the person that they hire, the monitor, with his or her noise meter, would have to know what ambient is in order to understand
Yeah.
whether there's been an excess. And so the ambient has to be figured out as the baseline way prior, and everyone has to agree that this is ambient.
Well, so I'll use the city of West Hollywood as an example. I've been working with their city officials and the code enforcement, so on both sides. When an enforcement officer is called, whether it's a police officer or a different person that has the noise monitor, they try and stand there long enough to find a break in the music, for instance, to say, oh, the noise level went down. Okay, those 2 minutes, no one was screaming, there was no music. Okay, now that's my baseline.
Ambient.
That's my ambient. Oh, they started screaming again. Okay, they're like, 20 decibels over. This is clearly a violation. That's how it was explained to me by the head of their noise enforcement division.
Okay, well, I think we're closer to understanding noise.
You and me both. All right.
Any other questions for anybody? All right.
Actually, the one I have on Michelin, on traffic is, whenever I drive north on Michelin at the beginning or end of school, there's a long line of cars taking up the inside lane. Has there been any response by the city to, I know that for a while they were saying, oh, you cannot block Highland, but makes that turn difficult.
So city staff, planning, public works, as well as city staff from the transportation department of the city of Pasadena met on site with Alverno representatives to look at some of the queuing situations that were occurring along Michelenda And we talked about appropriate signage, possibly installing red line curbs to avoid blocking intersections and line of sight from those intersections. So that's part of the master plan issues that we're addressing there. And if Mr. Farsing wanted to come up and speak to that further.
Okay, no, it seems to be something that people ask me about on a regular basis, and I've seen it, so.
Yeah, I guess I'm confused because I thought tonight we're gonna talk primarily about filming and the special events in the villa.
No,
My understanding is.
And you are correct.
Yeah, and I guess what we'll do is we'll have the traffic engineer here. When the commission will have to decide what you want to do with agenda item number 2, and that really gets to the school and the issues of traffic around the school. But as Mr. Gonzalez indicated, there have been a number of meetings between the school, the city staff, City of Pasadena traffic engineers, and they've been putting more cars on the campus. They've been opening, it primarily is an issue where the gates weren't open early enough for students to get, the parents to get in and drop off the students. Same with the afternoon. They've changed the afternoon gate opening time too. So again, they're working on solutions. It's kind of an iterative, process where they keep trying to make it better. But we can go into more detail on the hearing for the master plan.
I guess we'll move on to public comment then. At this time, anybody who would like to speak specifically to this agenda item may come forward. Please state your name and address for the record, and keep your comments to 3 minutes, please.
I'm Keith Stevens of West Grandview Avenue. My wife and I have lived here for 30 years and have put up with the parties and film shoots at the villa for dozens of nights a year, every year, in addition to all school activities. I am against any additional use permits being issued for the Alverno property beyond the CUP for the school. The villa was rented on April 30th this year for a private party. By 6 p.m., the music and subwoofers were in full swing, permeating into our home. The current temporary use permit says the bar closes at 9:30, the music stops, and the event ends at 10. At 10:40, the music was still blasting, and the guests, including several minors, gathered in the parking lot. Police arrived and the music stopped, but the gathering was not dispersed. At 11 p.m., there were still dozens of guests, including several minors, gathered in the parking lot, and the police were dispatched a second time. The current TUP says the facility should be closed by 11 p.m. In the July 12th City Council meeting discussing temporary use permit for movie filming amendments, the movie production term taillights was introduced to define closing time, as in, it's 11 p.m., gates closed, all we see is taillights going down the hill. That was not the case on April 30th, and the facilities manager was on site. This is not the first time we've had these issues, and this is in addition to all the school activities. On Saturday, July 2nd at 7 a.m., the Alverno Gardening Blower Patrol came to life, waking us up earlier than we are entitled to. The current city service code says no garden equipment until 8 a.m. on Saturdays. We called the facilities manager for Alverno to instruct them to stop. Apparently, the manager was enjoying a well-deserved and long-anticipated Saturday sleep-in. We described the situation, and the immediate reply was, "So you want me to get dressed and go down to the school at this hour?" Yes, we expect our institutional neighbor to allow us our well-deserved Saturday morning sleep-in. Our 7 o'clock hour had been claimed, and this is in addition to all school activities. We've accumulated 30 years of similar stories, and I can only conclude that Alverno is not interested in respecting their neighbors' rights, and they seem more interested in pleasing their customers and appeasing their vendors than following code. Let's make it easy and just say no. Let's give the night back to the residents of Good Hardy Heights and let Alverno concentrate on being a school. I'm out of time. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm Cynthia Swenka, and I live at 239 Wilson. And before my statement, regarding noise, for me, it's not just the noise of a guitar, let's say, or music, but with generators and bass, there's also this vibration associated with that, and that's what kind of permeates. So I don't know if that's included in noise studies or not, but that's one thing I notice is that vibration. But if I understand correctly, location managers will be the first point of contact if neighbors have an issue with a filming production. However, based on past experience, and most recently the June 29th Poolman production at Alverno, location managers weren't responsive to me. So I sent a cordial text to the location manager to determine the cause of noise and vibration during this June 29th production, and my text was never answered. And I think it was generator related, but that's what I wanted to talk to him about. Now, when I had something the location manager wanted, namely assigned approval for this particular production, and I sent him a text on June 23rd saying that I had that, there was a knock on my door within 10 minutes to collect that approval. So I guess my point is that conditions and requirements and rules, they sound great on paper. However, they have no teeth if there's no enforcement. And I think it's safe to say that for years, neighbors have felt that Alvernos and city agencies have ignored neighbor grievances such as excessive noise. So my thought is, if this is not already so stated, that if planning intends to approve these CUPs, that a requirement is added that calls for at least one review 1 year after approval date to determine if Alverno has lived up to the conditions of the CUPs. Thank you.
Thank you.
Members of the Planning Commission, good evening. My name is Paul Savoy. I live at 713 West Montecito Avenue in Sierra Madre. And I submitted via email a much lengthier discussion that I have time to deal with in 3 minutes. So let me just hit a couple of highlights from what I've been hearing this evening. First of all, Alverno, not just in this meeting, but in previous Community Service Commission meetings, Planning Commission workshops, City Council meetings, etc., have emphasized the fact that they need significantly more days of filming, significantly more days of private events with fewer days in between because of their precarious financial situation. And, you know, in a previous meeting, it was noted by the head of school, I believe, that, you know, unlike many other independent schools, they don't have an endowment to rely on, et cetera. Well, okay. But if you look at the financial information that's presented in the packet, it is very, very limited. You see, you know, revenues and expenses primarily for the villa, but you see nothing else really regarding the school as a whole. And, you know, to say that, well, we need 60 days of filming, we need 40 days of private events, and that's especially because, you know, let's face it, the filming industry, everything's so precarious right now with COVID and all these other things. You can say all of that, but what shouldn't be precarious are all of Alverno's other sources of revenue that are not related to events filming at the villa. And really, that information was not presented in the packet. I really have not heard any mention of it tonight either. And that, I think, would be useful information for the Planning Commission to determine whether or not there really is the genuine financial need to be able to, you know, dramatically expand the number of days of filming, the number of days of private events. So that's one point. The other point that I'll make really quickly is the fact that there is a potentially very big conflict with the new film ordinance that's coming up for a second reading at the next council meeting. If Alverno is allowed for more than 30 days of filming, and in the film permit, the person applying for the permit also seeks to use off-site locations for staging, for parking, for porta potties, for all this other stuff, that's going to be a problem, because the film ordinance says that you can't have, that ancillary sites can't be used for more than 30 days. So if suddenly you're allowed 45 days of filming, 60 days of filming, etc., you've got a really significant conflict. So I would propose that Alverno, when they do filming, that all activities must be within Alverno's footprint, that they would not be allowed to use ancillary sites if they get more than 30 days. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Good evening. My name is Kristen Stevens, and you already have enough to read from me. I couldn't get it all in there. Literally, we just got some of this stuff, like Friday. It's way too much. Why did we not, as residents, have this last year? And we've been asking for the noise studies because some of us went to the noise meeting, and we were told, no, you can't have it. I wanted to hire a noise engineer. I can't wrap my head around it right now because I'm doing so many of the other things I'm trying to focus on in this petition, and help neighbors who can't make it to these meetings get their voice heard, because I'm not going to explain why they can't make it. But they just don't seem appropriate. I don't know. I know they don't measure the vibrations from bass, heavy-driven music. And I do think that first wedding that was in the noise study was reasonable. I mean, at least for us on Grandview, maybe not so much, I don't know, down below on Highland. Quinceanera was a little more of a problem. It comes up to logs. We were begged to call Alverno first. Where are those logs? I started documenting through emails, which I have too many to give you. Either I get the non-response, or I've sent this to my superiors, or it's a gaslighting of, no, those trucks were not that loud, stuff like that. But even when I've called the police, there is a reference to it in my letter. It's just ridiculous to look back through this documentation and, well, and one, hear that they don't know who the neighbors are who've been writing and trying to talk to them and going. My husband and I have gone to these meetings for a freaking decade. They don't know us. And then I can't believe he keeps bringing up this 98 lawsuit, because if I had seen that part, I would, nah, 97, 94 decibels is too high. I've gone through a bunch of apps, and I think it's pretty satisfactory. We bought the same noise monitor, we did some monitoring, but it didn't give us what we needed to provide to, let's say, Alverno, if they'd actually talk to us. They'd say, let's sit down, let's work this out. That hasn't happened at any of these 3 meetings that we've attended. We've been mansplained or told what they want, and when we've shown up to them in good faith, we've been dissed by some of the members who sit in front of us. Like, yeah, we heard you about the noise before. Well, we're here to talk about it, so let's work it out. But that wasn't what happened. We did want the noise, because to me, that is one of the biggest issues. It's going to cost us a heck of a lot of money to retrofit our home, which is a mid-century California lifestyle. And I have had to change everything. And that's in the letter. But some of these things, it's very difficult. I appreciate what Cindy came up with. I think that's a great idea. Come back in a year. Some of these TUP, I think they need to be more expanded. It's very confusing, and I know I'm jumping all over the place right now, to say you can't have amplification, but yet I showed you something. It was a ceremonial drum with a bass-driven heavy music being played on an amplifier at the end of Highland Gate. I was 4 blocks away when I first heard that, going on a walk, and as I walked to my house, I was like, oh my gosh. I filmed it, I took pictures, I went over to him and said, excuse me, sir, can you turn it down? And the letters in there, I believe, where it was like, no, I was hired to do this. I said, but we have a TUP, you cannot have amplification. Where's the noise monitor? Where's the wedding caterer? And I'm not comfortable walking on campus there, because they should be available and say, here I am.
If you can
Wrap it up? Yeah, see, there's way too much here. Okay, 75%, we want it to stick. There's a reason for that. We'd like to see sound dampening measures still after a decade with the villa. We want the 14 days in between. We don't want any more liberal policy. We don't want them to go to 60 days. I think they can work something out. There's a lot of good stuff with fundraising in your families that can happen. And I hope we don't finish this tonight, because frankly, this is just way too big and there's a lot to cover. 3 minutes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Lisa Puleo, and I live at 672 West Highland. I reviewed the 800 pages over the last 72 hours, and I left it all on the table for you today. And I have trust in this process, and I have trust in all of you, so please help us out here. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Council. Thank you for being here, and thank you for listening to all of us and giving us your time. Let me start off by saying that I am a Sierra Madre resident. My family has been here for 5 generations. My mother and family members have owned property here since the 1950s. I am one of 11 Alverno employees that live in Sierra Madre. Alverno also has many families that live in Sierra Madre and attend the school as well. I've volunteered and participated in various community events my entire life. I personally take offense when I am being lied about and spoken about with such animosity. The school and myself have been publicly criticized from specifically 4 households that surround the school and the city meetings, that they have never been listened to, and that I in fact ignore calls and emails. I have a large folder from 4 neighbors that include all of my responses, and the city staff is copied on about 99% of them, if they were copied in the beginning from these neighbors. If there would have been any questions from city member, staff, or council, or any of the commissions have asked me personally what is happening, I certainly would have addressed them, or at least reach out to Ms. Fenara, our head of school, for an explanation. But to my knowledge, no one has come up and asked these things. Since I took the position as facilities director, not one city council member, planning commission member, city staff, or official has attended a neighborhood meeting that Alverno has had, and they have been invited because they are copied on an email every single time, along with our calendars.
Whoa,
Last-
time out.
Oh,
What?
The
we have
city
never.
staff, city planner is always copied.
Okay, you
Okay.
specifically said the city council and the planning commission.
We
And I
said-
think that we can very
Okay,
clearly
I apologize.
definitively say we have not
I
received
apologize for.
I've never
repeating that
received, and
sentence.
I've been on this commission for 17 years.
I apologize for adding the council or this planning commission. It's always the city staff, city manager, city staff, the film liaison. They're all copied at police department, everything like that. I apologize. This last Sierra Madre official to attend a NAMER meeting was Chief Marilyn Diaz in 2008. If a city official has attended the meetings, they would see that there is always 3 to 6 disgruntled neighbors in attendance out of 194 households, which we do receive the school mailings. There are always multiple neighbors in support of the school as well in attendance. We do listen to them, we take notes. Clearly, the Planning Commission wanted us, along with City Council and staff, to do more studies and findings, which we did and presented them all in the last 3 neighbors. 40 of our neighbors basically are directly surrounding the school. And they mostly would say there's no concerns. There are always 3 or 4 Wilson neighbors that I talk to actually go out on the street. Everyone has my number, emails, and texts. For the most part, I physically go out there and speak to them. I do not ignore calls or texts. I'm on site for every film that takes place on campus, along with the city rep and a fireman representative. We all make sure that the protocols are being implemented while on campus and our surrounding grounds. We drive around to make sure. I am on site for rented events, and I always talk with the officers that may be called out due to a complaint. During every encounter when the officers are there, they do not see that the event's music is exceeding sound ordinance or even hear it from the streets. But I am there and I talk to them, and we do turn it down so that the police officer sits there, they wait for 10 minutes, they circle back. There's one family resident who's lived there before the school was. They're in
You
support
can-
of Alverno.
You can-
Okay. They also have been there, their support. The issue is that I am there, I do answer. On April 30th, after that 10 p.m., it was a police call that was made on a neighbor coming up screaming at students that were our students coming back from the Sierra Madre Playhouse. The police took a report, the report was filed. It had nothing to do with the quinceanera. On the comment on July 2nd that I'm accused.
I really need
that I said
to have this wrapped up.
that you wanted me to get dressed. That is not true, and I never said that. And I said, if I'm going to hang up the phone and I'm going to drive right up there, which I did, met with the police officer, and responded to Ms. Stevens. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Is there anybody else who would like to make a public comment about this agendized item? All right, seeing none, I think we will adjourn for 10 minutes before we deliberate on this topic.
Perfect.
All right, we will now resume public hearing number 1 on the agenda. We've just brought it back to deliberation for the commission. Who would like to lead us off?
Ooh.
Well, do you wanna just,
Can we go, should we go through the ones at a time and?
yeah, I think so.
That's probably the way, that's probably the way to do it.
Cause
So,
I think that before we get to the conditions of approval, I think generally it makes sense to approve the CUP as a replacement for the, continual TUPs, which didn't make sense. So it's really an issue of refining the conditions of approval to match. So I think, as you were saying, Bob, just going through them one by one is the way to do it.
But I think it may be helpful, it's helpful to me to understand that we're dealing with a site that is a school, but also is an event location. And that there are school functions which are part of the curriculum, which as a former site administrator, they come with the label of school. And there's activities that schools have that make noise. I lived next to elementary school, so yeah, we hear it all day long. But we're focusing today on an event location because we're looking totally at what the villa is all about, and that we're looking at as a location that is generating income, and where the income is going is not our purview per se, but the fact that it is an event location and we're trying to manage what happens at an event location and its relationship to the neighbors around it. So it's not so much a school, but it's an event.
But, and the important point about that is for what we're doing, and we're thinking about the number of events, the days that the events are held, these are all non-school events.
Right.
And so if there's a school event on a Sunday, if we say no Sunday events here, that doesn't preclude the school events.
Right.
Yep, that's a good point.
And we're trying to look at the intensity of use at an event location. Yeah, I agree.
Yep. All right. I guess as we can just start going through these conditions one at a time.
My first one is of the general conditions, and I'm not really sure where this goes, but I think the concept of having a review after the first year, a number of commenters raised this, is a really good idea. And I would like to add into these general conditions a condition that we revisit this after a year and see what progress we've had on some of the conditions. There's some of these things that we'll negotiate, we'll monitor how the semi-annual meetings are going. That kind of thing I think would be really useful.
I think that one of the things that we've heard continually from the public in general is that there seems to be some dissonance between how well complied with the agreements and the codes and all of that stuff has been. So I think that there's the concept in here of if there is violation, that then the CUP can come before us and we can elect to revoke it. I would love to see remediation before that ever happened. And so I think that ongoing we should be reviewing this on an ongoing basis, not just after 1 year. Like, to the extent that that's possible, if we said, I think maybe at the first anniversary makes sense because of the bottled up and pent up frustrations, but then maybe every other year that we review to see compliance with the CUP.
And one of the things that the school brought up about compliance was they referenced the police reports. And I would like to understand, it seems to me that we're hearing from the public that they reached out to the police, but not every call generated a report. And so at one point, Alverno can say, well, there were only 2 reports for the whole year. But we're hearing from the public that, no, we called because we're looking for help. So, if we're going to review and there's going to be baseline and people are going to say, well, no one called, so it must be okay. How do we understand what that level of concern is so that there are records? Because it seems to me that when we review, we're going to have to look back and say, well, what happened this year, and was there a problem, and how did things go? And one of the official documents is a police report. So,
thank you, Commissioner. I can speak to the city manager, and the city manager can speak to the acting police chief to see if he can have to see if they can record or keep some kind of documentation of calls generated for that site, not just
reports.
Police reports generated.
And I think that there's a difference between the two. And I think if you ask the police department for reports, that's an official document whereas the calls are something else.
And I think that actually that's even one step further. What we heard from the public is we've been encouraged to work with Alverno. And so I think one of the things that we have in here is having an on-site monitor for events. And so by maintaining the independence of that on-site monitor, part of the report that they should turn in at the end of the night are, along with the timed readings, any calls that they received on the bat phone.
Yeah, I agree, and I also think we should, make it so that people can report to the city manager's office about the event coordinators. Because if people call the event coordinator and just get blown off and they don't, that should make back to the city manager so the city manager doesn't rehire that person. And also, if the person does a really good job, y'all should report that as well, so we can, keep using those people. 'Cause I think that's a feedback loop that could be very helpful.
Yeah, I have no problem making a decision a year from now, if I'm still here, but I do want some criteria.
I heard him.
that we can, because otherwise it's he said, she said, and that's frustrating for everybody.
So I know that we can't codify to that level, but you can take these recommendations back to the city manager?
Correct.
With regard to the review and other changes we might have on this, do we have time for a meeting in August to bring this back to get it approved before the existing TUP runs out, or do we have to write these now? Because there's also some issues about the lighting and other things I sort of wanted to hear back from people.
So according to my calendar for the Planning Commission, the next available meeting that would be available to discuss the Alverno project would be September 1st.
Are we dark the 25th of August?
We are not.
Oh, we're.
Well, we are, yes, because there's apparently 3 weeks. So we have a meeting on August 4th and August 18th. Both of them are for the Meadows.
Oh, boy.
Well, if we approved it, if it came back on September 1st, that would mean there's just one day, right?
And the ordinance is slated to take effect, both the filming ordinance and TUP ordinance, assuming council conducts a second reading at the next meeting, will take effect end of August, around the same time that the this TUP will expire for Alverno.
And once the new code from council is live, does that obviate the current TUP?
No, that TUP will remain in effect until August 31st.
Okay, so ministerially, I believe the director has the purview to just extend it through the next day, if need be.
That's correct.
Okay.
So it sounds like we can give recommendations and then see another draft of this.
Yeah, one of the things you guys talked about with the complaint, someone mentioned in one of their letters that instead, unless you tell the police this is a complaint, they don't register it. So we might need to have a procedure that goes outside how the police normally operate if they're willing to do it, or something at the city manager's office, or use the monitor you're talking about, because if we can't change the way the police operate, then you know, the reporting won't be accurate, which is what you're trying to. And I noticed that was one of the comments that might be helpful, so we can get an accurate reporting of what's really going on.
So then I think, just so we can put a circle on it, we were looking at a review at the first anniversary and then every other year after that. Did that sound okay to people, to the commission?
If it's absolutely on the first anniversary, and then maybe if that is smooth sailing, then every other. But if there's problems, then either we, rewrite or we then continue to do annually until we're, everything, we work out the bumps.
I'm fine with that. I mean, I would like to have it that we have the flexibility in the first annual review to determine, how often those come, because I think if it does become smooth sailing, I don't want to keep having these things annually.
Right.
But it does make sense to, be able to, do another year if we need to, right?
Well, so we could say that it's annual unless otherwise designated.
Yeah, that's fine. And remember that the school itself is going to change in the next few years because they've put in to do a building plan and stuff like that. So the nature of the school may be different too.
Okay. Did you have other changes to general conditions?
No.
Anybody else have changes to general condition? All right. That brings us to special event and film or photography activity conditions.
How about noise?
How about noise?
If we all want to use an interesting phrase, be on the same sheet of music, is it worth to invest in a agreement as to what the ambient noise is in the neighborhood, so that when the people that are monitoring or the police or whoever show up, have a standard to measure against?
My recommendation on the noise point would be that allow staff the time to speak to the code enforcement officer to see how noise is enforced in the city, and we can provide a report on that at the next planning commission meeting.
Yeah, I think that would be helpful. I get the concept of ambient noise and exceeding that, but the problem is it becomes very difficult to enforce and for the event monitor to know if that's a reasonable level. I would also like to hear, if we could, more information on the low or bass noises and the vibrations, if that's, because those might not register very loud, but they could be very disturbing. So I think it would be useful to have some more information on that as well.
I'd personally be willing to use the applicant's sound study guy to say, hey, yeah, this is the ambient noise, because he put the monitors out there.
Mm-hmm.
It's just that, because I don't know what I don't know what the response will be for the for either PD or whoever's doing the monitoring to decide, well, what's too loud.
Yeah.
Because he has no reference point.
Yeah,
Okay.
I worry that changes so frequently. I remember on days that the racetrack was running at Irwindale, the ambient noise was higher.
At your house?
at my house
Yes.
than it was at other places.
Yeah.
So, or other days of the week. So the ambient noise, I think, changes. I guess that's the concern.
Yeah, and
But
it's okay with me if whatever everybody decides, well, this is the number, and that's fine. And then we have our point of reference.
yeah. Sorry, did you have more on noise?
Nope.
Yeah, and some minor changes on number 1.4. I'm fine with changing the neighbors to the city. I think it's not necessarily so much a notice issue as a negotiation issue, and I think it makes more sense for the city to sort of represent the neighbors.
So let me take a different point on that.
Yep.
Is this really solving anything? If we're already saying, or that they're asking if they can dance outside, doors are going to be open, air conditioning or non-air conditioning is not really solving for keeping the doors closed. So is this really germane to what we're getting at? Does it do anything?
Well, you don't know how it came in here. I put a question mark next to it, like, where did this come from?
Yeah.
And that's why I asked. But if you're running a film shoot, it creates a lot of heat. So you bring in these portable air conditioning units and you flood the building, with cold air just to keep people from overheating. And so those units are exterior and they make a lot of noise and they increase the ambient noise. So maybe the thought was, well, we should have a building that has its own air conditioning, and then that'll be quieter, or the compressors will be in such a place where they're not going to, contribute to the noise. It's my guess, maybe that, and also it's possible that when things get going, they open the doors and windows because they want better ventilation because it gets hot, and that's allows sound to go, out through the neighborhood. So it may be perhaps that somebody felt that, well, if we closed all the doors and windows except for the fire doors, then it would reduce the amount of sound that gets out of the building into the neighborhood. I don't know.
I think if we change it from central air conditioning to just air conditioning, so there's flexibility to figure out the best use of that, and then staff can talk to them, and in a year we can see if anything needed to get done.
Well, especially if something else is brought in, because maybe their own, if this is to keep the sound inside to provide air conditioning, it's not sufficient for filming or whatever they're doing, they still may need some external stuff.
Well, and I guess that's my confusion about this, is we don't really know how it got in here.
No.
We don't really know why it's in there. And
We're guessing.
And it could equally be because we want them to move the air conditioning, that we're worried about external air conditioning for movie shoots, as it could be that we want to keep the music inside for
Parties,
rental
weddings,
uses.
yeah.
So it doesn't seem like it's in there, I guess.
Yeah, Commission, I would recommend that any conditions placed in this CUP not be placed because they were once placed in there, but there be a current justification for it.
Well, then maybe it should be taken out. It doesn't sound like it.
What about if we just delete this, and then in 1.7, we change 1.7 to we can say, including air conditioning as applicable. Because that way, if it's needed, it's fine. If we don't, and that way we don't have to specify exactly that you have to have an air conditioner if it doesn't do anybody any good.
I like that.
I'm okay with that.
And then on 1.5, I don't have a problem with the dancing on the terrace if it's just based on the music from inside. I don't think the dancing itself is going to make a lot of noise. It's just I had big issues with
YMCA.
with the amplified music coming outside. So
Yeah, we mitigated a lot of that with the lack of amplification, so they should have that option.
And
Okay,
then-
so we're saying on 1.5, we're okay with dancing on the terrace.
Yep.
And then 1.7, we talked about changing neighbors to city and adding, including air conditioning if applicable.
Ready to
Frequency.
Yep.
frequency of use, level of use. So the first part, section 2.1, speaks to the rental events, not filming, but the rental events.
And an event is defined as a one-day occurrence, or is it a multi-day occurrence?
I believe the code defines it as a 24-hour period.
So you're looking at 26 one-day, 24-hour events.
Maximum 24.
Okay.
And that doesn't include film, which is covered somewhere else, or school events.
Correct.
And does that, if there is setup required, does that count as one of the days? Or, yeah?
Yes.
Yes.
But that wouldn't apply to a wedding where they were cleaning up the next day? Help me understand.
So it does include cleanup, is what the director of planning is telling me.
So it could be 2 days, so one event could actually be a Saturday event with a Sunday cleanup, and that's 2 of their days, correct? You're counting them as.
Do you need the kind of the practice we do now? Would that be helpful?
Sure, that would,
So generally what happens is
if you can come up to the microphone so we can hear you, thank you.
Friday, the rentals come, if there's a wedding on Saturday, they deliver the day before. It has to happen between 9 and 6 p.m. finishing. Then Saturday, the way our TUP reads now, that a full event, when that means people are arriving, the ceremony starting, it can't exceed 6 hours for the event, from the time the bride walks down the aisle till the guests leave. It cannot exceed that. So we don't allow cleanup on Sunday, other than if there's a school event or there's another event coming in. We're not cleaning up because that has already taken place within that 10 p.m. And the vendors have an extra hour, 11 p.m. So that's generally how it works. The TUP has never included a setup day and a cleanup day as an event. The event.
So you're saying that a wedding will come in and drop off stuff on Friday.
Mhm.
Somebody will set it up for the event on Saturday.
They set up on Friday.
Okay.
Yeah.
It sits out, gets used the next day, and then by 11 o'clock p.m., it's out?
No. So 11 o'clock, 10 o'clock, all guests have to leave. 11 o'clock, the other vendors, it's really the caterer, has to clean the floor, make sure the trash is picked up. If, let's say, votives were rented, the florist could come back and take those away. But as far as moving equipment, a rental company will not come in and move things the night of. They have to come back Monday.
So they
Unless
come back
there's
while
They
school's
come back
in
Monday while
session?
school's in session, and it has to be within that working period. And we don't allow them to come in until after car line, so really it's 9 o'clock. They could come in at 8:30, but it's 9 o'clock.
Okay.
Unless there's a school event on Sunday.
And that's specified in their current TUP?
In those 52,
The TUP ordinance, I'll say, is silent on this point. So it's not addressed in the ordinance itself.
it's within our TUP that we've been working with
Right,
since
right.
2010.
Understood. Okay, thank you.
It seems to me that 26 is the right number, but I don't think we want to double count. So I think if we want to, if staff can clarify as necessary to get the, 26, you count the wedding once. And the other thing is, we don't want the cleanup to go into all hours of the night.
Correct.
Because that's even worse for the neighbors. So, if we can clean up the definition of event and then have it 26, I think that makes sense to me.
Yeah.
And I think that the trade-off for having a different definition retains some of that 6-hour time period from the existing TUP. So we may need to redefine events in here. Okay, so the next one was, I'm sorry, was there any other clarification on that one?
No,
Yeah,
just-
I'm good.
Yeah, that definition would be helpful.
And then, no more than 2 rental events per month may be held during the months of July through August and the month of December. So if the total number allowed is 26, then there's 2 months, I'm sorry, that was not great math. Yeah, that was right. 2 months where they need to be allowed 3.
Correct. And the
Or
su-
we up the number to 3, and when they run out of events, they run out of events.
Yeah, but the way this is written is the restrictions are only July, August, and December. So in June, they could have 20 events. I mean, they're not gonna, because they do them
Yeah,
on the
then
weekends, but I don't think that's,
Actually, I like your suggestion better that it says 3, but put with a maximum of 26, because they could get, somebody decides, well, we're going to do a lot of, I don't know, New Year's events or something like that, or there might be other kinds of ceremonies that they want. But the max will still be 26, and there won't be more than 3.
I'm fine with that.
That'll allow for seasonality where they can
Yeah.
do better certain months.
Yep.
Does that make sense?
I think 2.2, were we looking to mail, or was that online, that we were going to include school events?
In the mailing that goes out to the residents?
I don't think we wanted to do the mailing. I think we wanted to do it on the online calendar, right?
Yeah, and the concept of cumulative, because the neighbors are impacted by both curricular events and non-curricular events. To the neighbors, the noise is still there and the event is still there. I think it would be helpful.
So you think it should be I guess well, we should hear from the applicant on the nature of how
Well, it says
fluid
it on the
those
website.
Yeah, thank you. That's a perfect word, because the school events are very fluid. The most fluid events are probably the sports events, because sometimes a team can't make it, something happens, we don't have referees or whatever, so that a sporting event would have to be moved. And I know that that does upset the neighbors when they see that there's supposed to be a basketball game on this day, and it ends up being on a different day, and they didn't know about it. But that can happen literally within, 6 hours. So we don't have time to run to the calendar and change everything to make sure that they know that, especially if they checked on Sunday and this thing is on Wednesday, say. So, I mean, we can't always be as true to it as we would like to be. And both the school curricular calendar is up on the website. It's a new website. So it's up on the website, and before we had problems with it. And we will have a neighbor one that does have the events on there, which are more, those are pretty standard and pretty solid. But the school things, I mean, taught in a school.
I mean, I was the athletic director for a number of schools, and you commit to a schedule, well in advance, and CIF then, authorizes that. And that will be 90% of what happens.
90%, correct.
So 90% is fairly, accurate. So if that was included along with the other events at the school, would give the neighbors a sense of the intensity of use on the property.
Correct.
And I think that's what we would be looking.
But often things will
Because
change.
From the neighbor's perspective, this is still just what they're going to experience. Whether it,
Yeah.
and you're gonna make the playoffs and whatever, so, I mean, it's gonna change.
Right.
But it will be mostly accurate.
Mostly accurate. Thank you. That's better fluid. And so we do our best to keep it up. Okay, thank you.
So we're good with mail, or do we want email?
Yeah.
I mean, I think,
Can I say just one more thing? And sometimes events are subject to change just because it happens sometimes. Either weddings get changed or
or school events get changed that may, like we have something planned and then because of rain, we have to move it or whatever. So it's that things will happen. So everything is always subject to change. So we always try to include that. Just realize all of this is subject to change. Okay.
The underlying code for events, is there a notification process for that?
Yes, there will be a 300-foot notification process for events.
And how far in advance does that have to happen?
I believe it's 7 days.
Okay.
I can check right now.
So there would never be a situation, like even if somebody changed a date, it would have to be changed at least 7 days in advance to comply with the underlying code.
Correct.
Yeah, but not for school events.
I'm sorry. I'm talking about the leased events. The curricular events are going to change. That's
Correct.
theirs. They're a school. They're going to have curricular events. They're going to change. Getting them directionally accurate is going to go so far.
Right, and this mailing that the Alverno representatives are mentioning would satisfy that 7-day notification requirement. But if it were to change, they would have to have a
Right.
new
Well,
notification.
Yeah, so she mentioned that sometimes a wedding will change or something else will change. And so I just wanted to clarify that the underlying code does state that you have to give at least 7 days notice.
Correct. And Chair Dennison, earlier you were talking about something posted online. Were you talking about the city's website or were you talking about Alverno's website?
No, it's section 2.2. It says that there's event information on the website shall be updated monthly.
Yeah, school's website.
The school's website.
The school's website. And so I just wanted to clarify that we were going to make sure that both curricular, leased, and filming events were all on there.
And so community would be able, and staff would be able to go to one location and say, oh, this is what happened. Because, it's gonna be Monday morning and you're gonna see, well, there was this and this and this happened over the weekend. What was that? And you could go back to the calendar and say, oh, it was this event.
So I think 2.5, are they looking for clarification that curricular events won't have?
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. It's leased events only.
Yes, leased and filming. And so I guess 3.1 was the next one they wanted us to consider.
Or rental events, I guess they're called here.
Rental events.
Yeah.
I think one of the things that we have heard is, from the public, is that they're really looking for a day off. And so I think that's probably what drove.
Yeah, I agree. I'm inclined to limit this to Fridays and Saturdays. I mean, the understanding is that this applies to rental events, right? So school events can still happen on Sundays, religious things. This is, the birthday parties and weddings and whatnot that we wouldn't have on Sundays. So I think that I would limit it to Fridays and Saturdays.
Anybody object to that?
Well, wasn't there something that they said that, I don't know if that constitutes a rental event, but I guess it would fall under religious ceremonies.
No, they mentioned the rental events that they do that are not that wouldn't be a wedding.
Yeah,
And
right.
those are rental events, and so those would be included in this.
Yeah, I think like birthday parties and whatnot.
Anniversaries.
Yeah, that doesn't make sense to me. I mean,
Oh, okay.
baptisms, I would think that would fall under the religious exception. And I don't think you'd have a lot of music going, blaring, heavy bass music.
Well, sometimes the baptism takes place at a church, and then the celebration of the baptism comes afterwards, which that would be something different. That would be the party. But whereas the sacred ceremony would happen at a font in a church, I would assume. So,
I don't know, I think the party kind of thing
doesn't need to happen on
doesn't need
Sunday.
to happen on Sunday here.
So we're saying on 3.1, rental events shall be held on Fridays and Saturdays.
And then, so in 3.2, we don't need the limitations on Sunday because we're not gonna have it.
And music is a hard cutoff at 9:30.
Yep.
And so, for rental events, one of the things that we've heard as well is that even if the event stops at 10, that there's still the cleanup that happens afterwards, right? And I think that we saw some of the noise spikes happening right at 10 o'clock.
I believe when the council considered this item with respect to the TUP ordinance, the understanding was that everything ends at 10. Of course, the planning commission can vary from that standard under this code, but it was my understanding from the discussion at the city council that with respect to the TUP ordinance, just as with filming its taillights at 10, so it's the case with special events at 10.
I'm okay with the consistency.
Yeah, I agree.
I think keeping consistent with the code that they've put forward is the right way to go.
And it makes enforcement easier.
Some latitude, that's up to you.
Yeah, that's fine. Clarification.
The concern is that the wedding does end at 10, but we're still cleaning up. So it's not that it's not that there's guests there. The guests are driving out of the parking lot, but we have to still clean. We can't leave a mess. Because we would have a real problem with, pest control. So we have to be able to clean up after the guests leave. So if it's guests out, we've got to be able to clean up right after they leave. We can't be literally cleaning up as they're all there still. So we need a little time after an event is over to clean up. And that's why the vendors really just the caterer and the bartender as they are cleaning up the mess left from the party. And the DJ packing everything up and all of that, that all takes time.
How about additional 30 minutes? Would that be enough? Because I think the objection is that they start hearing all this stuff up to 11 o'clock and the neighbors are, it's something, but I don't know.
We already said that the music ends at 9:30 in 3-2.
Yeah, that would be the DJ, but there's still the cleaning, like the washing of the dishes or the packing up. And, they rent a lot of the dishes have to be packed up in the caterers' vans and their equipment. So just, it does take, that's why we don't have the people coming in to pick up the chairs and all of that in the evening, but the people dealing with the food, they're cleaning up.
It's interesting that when we hear from the neighbors, they're actually more concerned about the people hanging out in the parking lot afterwards.
And I don't, we do have security there until 11, making sure people are leaving. So I don't know what that is.
Okay. Unless it's
all right.
Unless it's some of the cleanup crew, because you're talking, that's what you're thinking about is the racket they're making, trying to clatter things together.
Packing up the dishes.
And yelling at hey, get this going. I can just imagine. So I was one of the caterers. Probably take some. Can't put dampers on it.
I certainly understand the need for the scullery work and that this is going to change the way that things have been done in the past. But I think that
I'm just.
granting a different number of events that is happening
Makes
over
it
the year.
inconsistent, so,
Yeah, I think we need to be somewhat consistent to the plan that the council's laid forth.
Yeah, but I'm inclined to give them an extra 30 minutes to do something, and then maybe they can work around that plan to try and make it work, because we're gonna have review process on this. And if we get, and
So I can tell you that in many years past, for a number of years, the Sierra Madre Fire Department put on the Fireman's Ball at St. Rita. And we had strict cutoffs, and we were able to clear everybody out and pick everything up because we started early and we were aggressive about pushing people out the door. So, I mean, I don't think the deadline is an insurmountable task. I think if you were aware of it and you were serious about it and everyone was motivated, because you've already stopped serving dinner a long time beforehand, so there should be very few things left out to pick up. And so, you know.
Question for staff, I didn't watch the city council thing, did they deal with this topic in detail, or was it sort of a general concept?
It wasn't a topic dealt with in detail, and we have a council member here if she remembers what that discussion was like.
The discussion, I believe, was more specific in the context of the filming, because the issue was the big trucks and all of the, sort of the equipment moving out, beyond the timing that was set. So I don't know that we had a specific conversation about it in the context of the temporary use permit. But there was a lot of discussion in general about trying to create consistency so that we're not creating, multiple standards, across the board, in terms of other things, and so it certainly is consistent with the conversation.
And again, the focus was on the noise and disturbance. So I actually don't know how disturbing cleanup activities are. But if they're not disturbing, it might make sense to accommodate. But if the cleanup activities are disturbing to nearby residents, then that might militate against extending out the time. I don't know.
I'm just thinking it's a change from what they've been doing, and I think they deserve a little latitude. No offense, Bob, firemen are a lot more team-oriented than a bunch of caterers and stuff. You guys, it's like the military, so I don't think we should hold them to the same standard.
You're paying the caterers, so it costs you, so you want them to be
I know,
working.
but they.
Firemen, we work for free back then.
That's right.
Yeah. Well, then you want to go home. Those guys, they want to make a lot of noise. I mean, I've been to events where they're packing things up and they make a lot of, and they may be the ones yelling in the parking lot and carrying on that they're hearing about, but maybe, 10:30 and get them out of there, and then the monitoring effect will be something we'll hear about from the neighbors, and then if we hear a lot of discussion that kind of ballyhoo that is going on, that we've heard that they are claiming that we get, the finger pointing on, we'll be able to get some more data on that, and then we can, tighten that up. We'll have plenty of review. I just think at this point I'd allow them some latitude, because you're asking them to cut back and have everything done right at 10 o'clock for events that just in the past have not gone that direction. We're cutting off.
Yeah, and I appreciate that there's going to be some change as this process happens. I guess what's kind of gnawing at me is, not gnawing at me, that's overstating it, but what I'm trying to reconcile is that there's a very clear-cut code for every other event in town. And so having an inconsistent use, there's, the number of events is significantly greater, and it's, you could make the case that it's commensurate with the size of the property. But the time is not something that changes because of the size of the property. And I guess that's the part of keeping consistent code that I'm having a bit of a hard time with.
And we've just heard that the city council was concerned about consistency, so it's not just gonna be us. So I think we should be consistent.
Yeah, but they're trying to push our meeting back to.
They can, I have great faith that
So.
this is not an insurmountable deadline, that they can meet it.
All right, well, I'm in favor of giving them some latitude. That's all I can say.
Chair Dennison, may I recommend, we have the benefit of having the city council do a second reading on this, so they will reconsider this item, the TUP ordinance, and they can provide direction to the planning commission as to what they meant with
Yeah,
respect to the TUP cutoff time.
I think that might be helpful.
Yeah.
I think consistency is a really important goal here, and so we might be able to put a pin in this one and come back to it when we revisit.
It's sort of like, how early can somebody start construction in Sierra Madre? Everybody knows the time, and so it's kind of universal, so, yeah.
That's right.
I think the next one is 4.3, and given the desire to wrap up, an hour makes more sense to me than 30 minutes.
I agree with that. I think we can revisit that one when we get the direction on the consistency.
Yeah.
Council?
Yep.
What is the next item that people,
5.2?
5.2, yeah. Semi-annual meetings. Can staff please forward to the planning commission the invitations to these meetings? And we could coordinate so we less than a majority go, so we don't have a Brown Act violation, but
The planning commission can attend a meeting of another body and have a quorum present, so long as the planning commission doesn't talk about
Anything.
Yeah,
So,
I would
make.
rather
have
just have less quorum. I think it's easier for us to stay compliant that way. But it would be useful, I think, just to sit in on one of these and see how they go.
Mm-hmm.
but I would recommend deleting in its entirety section 5.2 and adding traffic to section 12.1, where they already have quarterly meetings.
Oh, radical change.
I believe section 12.1 is where they already have to have quarterly meetings, and so if we just add it as another bullet point there, then we can get rid of this entirely.
I'm in favor of that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
good
So
job.
Please forward those 12.1s to us then.
Okay.
Do we need to specify delivery trucks? I guess is this for rented events? Seems like we don't want any trucks idling. I just don't want there to become
Well,
delivery versus,
well, it's interesting, because we've heard from head of school that not much happens on Sunday, but we've put in there on occasions where pickups must occur on Sunday because of schedule or school-related, event on Monday. The shall commence no earlier than 12 noon.
yeah, and I guess they said that they don't do that on Sunday, so we could remove that.
I don't know, maybe they do? I don't know.
Unless there's a school-related event.
I mean, as a former school administrator, having everything ready for Monday morning was a critical element of any weekend event.
But this doesn't have to do with school. This is only for film or lease.
No, but when pickups must occur on a Sunday because of a scheduled school-related or non-rental event on Monday. In other words, the cafeteria got used for a dance and somebody's got to reset the cafeteria, then, you've got to get it done on Sunday, I guess, but maybe not.
But this specifically calls out rental event furniture, so that wouldn't be
Mhm.
specific to curricular activities, right?
I guess it depends on whether the rental event and coincides with where the curricular event is. In other words, they rented out a section of the school that they need for education on Monday. And somebody's got to reset
Right.
reset that room so that education can take place on Monday.
Yeah, because we do use the villa for educational purposes. So if there's an event happening at the villa, if we're having a mass on Monday morning, we've got to get it set up, and we have to have everything cleared out from the wedding.
I thought we heard earlier that you guys don't do that on Sunday, that everything gets picked up on Monday morning after 9 a.m.
If it's a normal school day. If it's a normal school day and there isn't a special event happening at the school on a Monday, then everything gets picked up, and that's majority of the time. But if it's a special day, let's say it's our Founder's Day on that Monday, then we're having a school mass and we're down at the villa and we've all got to be there. Everything from the wedding would need to be picked up the day before.
So
That's why I think the stipulation is in there, is that there are those times when it would need to happen.
So wouldn't the curricular event for the school take precedent over the rental event?
If we have a rental event, that would be on the weekend.
No, but if it's gonna impact curriculum and a school function on Monday, then maybe that area needs to be blocked off so that it doesn't impact. So in other words, you know, for a specific day where there's the Founder's Day or whatever, you know you're going to have, you've already calendared that event because it's an important event for the school, then that would imply that you would not rent out that same space if you can't have it ready for Monday, for the school event. So the school event takes precedent over, you know, a money event.
It would normally do that, but it doesn't always work out that way, especially if a bride
How can it
booked
not work out that way? You build the calendar.
But a bride might book this, you know. I would like just to say respectfully to the commission that this was put in years and years ago because it was something that needed to be addressed. It was built into the provisions that we put in there, knowing that it does sometimes happen. Of course, we always try to put our school events first. It doesn't always work out that way.
How could it not work out that way?
Well, because sometimes calendars change, you know, because sometimes a bride will book a year and a half in advance.
But
So I'm sorry, I don't have the answer you want right now. All I am trying to say to you is that this is why the provision is put in there. It is very rarely used. I'm not even sure if we used it this year, but in this past year at all. But that is why it's there. It's just for those one-offs. So, thank you.
We could add it to the report.
okay.
Okay. Next on lights.
7, lights.
I think the light rules should be the same for the filming and the rental event. It'd just be a lot easier to implement. And it would be nice to get a report back on what the underlying condition of approval or the underlying rules are for lighting and whether we need to address them separately here. And how that affects with the city's dark sky policy. And then separately, there's a typo in 7.2 where we still have 2 UP.
Good catch. Anything else on light?
Nope. Next I have is 8.1.
8.1. I feel like we might revisit this when we have the finalized time.
Yep. But this interesting here is the suggested time is 9 p.m.
Right, which is
before closing, which means basically they'd have to bundle all that stuff up and leave it inside, and then throw it out the next day.
Chair Dennis, may I ask for a 1-minute recess to speak with you?
Absolutely. right, so are we gonna revisit 8.1?
Yeah, I think
What do
that
we have?
when we do revisit, I think we can take out the language, whatever we do, that says the day of the event, because I don't think we want them to throw out the bottles on any day after 9 PM.
Okay. So with that edit, let's look at, let's revisit this when we have clarification on timing.
Yep. I already made a comment about the on-site event monitor reporting. I don't think we need to change the conditions of approval, but I do think it'd be useful for that to be logged and then to have a mechanism for people to report to the city manager's staff.
I think that's good. Anything else? Anything else before we keep moving?
I'm good until film.
All right.
So I do have one for staff in both element 10 and 11. It talks about the applicant modifying their contracts to reflect requirements that the DJ comply with the conditions and that the school is entitled to enforce those conditions. And then in 11, the property owner's rental contract shall include prohibitions per the city code. At some point, will that be confirmed, that their contracts do reflect that language?
It's not currently so drafted, but we can have, if you'd like, we can draft it so that a member of city staff can follow up with them on that.
Yeah, I mean, if it's in here, that it says that they will do it and it'll be part of their contract, it would, I mean, once the contracts get rewritten and copied, then it's pretty straightforward, but I can easily see that it's something that gets overlooked between now and a year from now.
But as I think through it now, Commissioner, realistically, I don't believe staff reviews these types of contracts when a TUP is issued. When a TUP is issued, these contracts aren't reviewed. So I don't know that it would make sense to have any member of staff.
Well, then can we
reviewing
get
these
it,
contracts at some point.
so that when we do our annual review, can we ask to see the contracts that show that language?
You can
Because
ask.
that would be compliance with what we're having here?
I think so. Yes.
Okay, well, let's
So
do
we
that.
at least say that they'll provide copies upon request? That, like, if
Yeah.
we find out it becomes an issue, we can ask for them?
Yes.
Yeah, more like audit rights.
Yeah.
12.1.5,
Yeah, I don't think we need that anymore.
we can probably get rid of it, and it's a TUP, not a CUP.
And this is where you wanted to put the traffic, right?
Right, so 12.1.5 would become traffic instead. All right, anything else before we move on to film? I had asked Planner Lynn to pull up the numbers of film shoots that were done from the applicant's presentation, just because I wanted to see this number versus where they're at. So, as I understand it now, all of the days of filming count, not just the filming day, under the new underlying code?
Correct. The filming ordinance was amended to expand the definition of film and photography activity. So before, film and photography activity did include prep, film, and strike. Now it also includes, I think it's called base camp, so the staging, etc.
Okay. So, outside of one amazing year, 45 days exceeds by a fair amount the number of days of shooting that they've done.
So, it's maximum filming and survey years was 66 days in 2018, but if I look at 2018, I can add all the days up.
Just a typo. It's 2019.
It's 2019, because it's 2019 is 66.
Okay.
So we've got like, call it 40 in 2018. And then 2021 might be where it came back to life and they did 30. And 30 in 17.
Yeah, you're right. I don't know. 45 is fine.
45 seems reasonable to me.
I think so.
That's 13.1. Yeah.
Thank you. Uh, 13.2, a 7-day interval rather than 10.
Isn't the underlying 14 the base rule?
Correct. Currently, the ordinance is written as 14 days.
Seems like 10 has already moved down from 14.
But that's for basic productions elsewhere in the city, right? They're not
Mhm.
having as many events, so.
You think 7's better?
Yeah, I think that they should be allowed that, just for the reasons they gave. I think they need some fluidity on that, and, because everything else, again,
I mean,
reviewing it.
because we've now included base camp, I think when they hit their days, they hit their days.
Yeah, that too, you're right.
Okay. It doesn't seem like a big deal either way to me.
And I think 13.3 was just somehow a duplicate.
Yeah.
So we should just delete 13.3.
Yeah.
And what was the commission's pleasure on 13.2?
7.
7.
We're okay with 7.
And then another one that Alverno brought up was the percentage of people required to supersede. And to me, it seems like, again, here's a point where consistency makes sense. Because we've done a lot of, with doing away with the regular, for regular shooting. So this is only for shooting outside these parameters. And it seems like keeping it consistent is going to help it with enforcement and just.
I agree with that.
Yeah, I mean, if the city council wants to change that, they can let us know between now and then, but I think 75% seems reasonable to me.
All right. Anybody have any last thoughts on the conditions of approval?
No, one thing I did notice, the ordinance, or let's see. Yeah, the planning commission resolution doesn't actually reference the conditions of approval. I think we should just cross-reference it in there that all this is subject to compliance with the conditions of approval.
Is there any other clarification staff would like from the planning commission?
I do not believe so.
So you need a motion to continue?
I believe we need a motion to continue this to a date certain of September 1.
That's correct.
So moved?
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously. do we want to keep going a little, or do we want to continue this to a date certain? We have a recommendation, Director?
Let's continue to a date certain of September 1st.
I think we might want to open the public hearing in case there's people that came that want to talk on this that aren't going to be able to make it on the 1st. We can take testimony, and then we can continue it.
Yeah, that's a great call out.
And are you going to calendar an event for us to review in a year from now?
I will include that in the conditions of approval, yes.
Because
I don't know when we're going to approve it.
right.
And it should be, within
Yeah.
2 meetings either side of the first anniversary or something. I don't want to call a special meeting on the anniversary.
Especially if it's a Monday.
That's right. It'd be a Sunday. Okay, so at this time, if there is anybody who would like to comment on conditional use permit 21-19 and addendum to the mitigated negative declaration to update the Alverno Heights Academy Master Plan, we will take public comment on this.
Well, that's a good idea.
So that everybody understands, we've finished the first item. The second item is the conditional use permit and the mitigated negative declaration as part of the master plan for Alverno.
And Chair Dennison, to clarify, will you be allowing public comment on this at the September 1st meeting for this
We
item?
will be
as well?
allowing public comment at that meeting as well. But if there's anybody who could only make this meeting and is here to speak on this, we will take public comment at this time. Seeing none, I will entertain a motion to continue this to a date certain of September 1st.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously. Next up, we have Planning Commission reports.
For me?
Seeing none, we'll turn it over to the Planning and Community Preservation Department reports.
Thank you, Chair Dennison. Our next meeting will be held on August 4th. It's the public hearing continued for the Meadows at Bailey Canyon project. And we've also secured the August 18th meeting for the Meadows at Bailey Canyon. City Council, as Councilmember Krebs indicated, is going to be considering the TUP ordinance and the filming ordinance as second reading. And City Attorney Garagosian is also going to introduce a couple of other modifications or amendments to the second reading of that ordinance. And some of them which we will pose that came from the commission tonight. Also,
I'm sorry, what's the date on that, Director?
July 26th. So next Tuesday. Also on July 26th on the agenda is adoption of the housing element with HCD, Housing and Community Development Amendments. So if you recall, we've submitted to HCD the adoption of the housing element and general plan updates. And we were waiting for comments back from HCD, so we are responding to those comments. The selected sites are not impacted. What's changed is HCD wanted further clarification regarding some of the programs that we identified. One of them was looking at from what I recall, transitional and supportive housing, the number of beds, also the Furthering Fair Housing Accountability Act. They wanted to beef up some of the language in the report in terms of programs, specific programs that we were going to utilize.
And encouraging inclusivity, right?
Yes, yes. So,
They're pretty minor comments.
yeah, so it doesn't impact the subsequent environmental impact report or, as I said, any of the selected housing sites. So it's fairly minor, but we do have to take it before the city council so they can adopt a new resolution.
And that'll take 2 readings?
That'll take 1 meeting.
Well-
It's like a mystery, but some take 2 and some won't. Okay?
Is it being adopted via ordinance or resolution?
By resolution.
Yeah, resolution. So it'll be just 1 reading and then back to HCD for their certification, hopefully.
Fabulous.
Well, kudos to the staff. This has been,
After 2.5 years.
this has been such a long road for you, and you've done so much work on it, so thank you for all the hard work that you and your team.
That's why I always said I wanted to retire before I had to work on the housing element.
Well, we're good for 9
This
years?
cycle is 20 years. We're changing.
So that concludes my report.
Thank you, Director Gonzalez. Hearing nothing else, I'm going to adjourn the meeting.
All right.